Stock Exchange. So do we know what's behind this whiplash? It went down big time. It opened about an hour or so ago, the markets. Now it's going back up. What's the latest?
Yeah, well, there was a brief rally initially because the European Union said that it was willing to negotiate and that it was considering dropping tariffs to 0% on industrial
on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Saw the S&P
and then there was a little bit of a
and there were
rumor
cheers
about
here on the floor of the
that,
New York Stock
the president
Exchange.
may be making
And then there was a little bit of a
the
rumor
Dow
about
moves
the
that
green and then the Nasdaq
the president
as well.
may be
And cheers
making
again
around
on
tariffs,
the
and we
floor
saw the
here.
Dow
But
cross
we
into
are
the green
back
and then
down.
the Nasdaq
We're back
as well.
down
And
again
cheers
across
again
all three
on the
indices.
floor
You can
here.
just see
But we are
how
back down.
Investors are desperate for some good news about this trade war.
How
any
inclination
investors
that
are desperate for
major
some good
trading
news about
partners,
this
which include the
trade war.
European
Any
Union, are willing
inclination
to
that
negotiate
is a
major
good sign.
trading partners,
As you
which
recall,
include the
President
European
Trump
Union, are
locked a
willing to
20%
negotiate
tariff
on the
European
Union.
As you recall,
now they are
Trump
coming to the
locked a
table saying they're ready to
20% tariff on the
negotiate.
European
But
Union.
investors looking
Now
for
they are coming to
more
the table saying they're ready to
news like that
negotiate
throughout the day.
But investors
and we
looking for
continue to see
more
these
encouraging
small rallies
news
throughout
like
the day
that
as
throughout
we
the
continue
day.
to hear
And we
news.
could
But
continue
as you
to
can
see
see
right there,
small
the
rallies
Dow back
throughout
down
the day as
about
we continue to
500
hear
points,
news.
guys.
But
Yeah,
as
we're
you can
watching
see
it
right
closely
there,
together with
the
you,
Dow
Vanessa
back down
Yurkevich,
about
at the Stock
500 points,
Exchange.
guys.
Thanks very, very much. Watching it closely
Very
together with
volatile
you,
there.
Vanessa Yurkevich.
All right,
at
so
the
let's
Stock
turn over to
Exchange. Thanks
Israel
very,
now.
very
That's
much,
Prime
Pamela.
Minister
Very
Benjamin
volatile
Netanyahu,
there.
who is back in
All right,
Washington.
so let's
He's getting
turn over
ready
to
to meet
Israel
with President
now.
Trump.
That's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu
is the
is back in Washington.
He's
He's
getting ready to meet with President Trump since last week's tariff blitz.
world
Israel
leader
got
to meet
slapped
with
with a
Trump
new
in person
17% tariff,
even after it dropped tariffs on U.S. goods
with a
the day
new
before.
17% tariff,
With us
even
here
after
in
it
the
dropped
Situation
tariffs
Room,
on
CNN
U.S.
Global
goods the
Affairs
day
analyst
before.
Kim Dozier. Kim, with thanks us here very much. In the Situation Room, CNN Global Affairs analyst Kim Dozier. Kim, thanks very much for joining us. President Trump, as you know, is looking to negotiate some sort of trade deal with Israel right now. Does he want to make that a potential model or blueprint for some of these other allies and countries in the Middle East to deal with this very sensitive and explosive issue?
Look, you've got two leaders who need a win. Netanyahu is facing a lot of unrest and political turmoil at home, and he flies straight back from these meetings to appear in his ongoing corruption trial. The hearing actually had to get delayed because of this emergency meeting to D.C. If he can go back to Israel with the win of getting the 17% tariffs lifted before they even get imposed on Wednesday, then that is wind at his back. For Trump also, he could be sending a signal that if you drop all your tariffs against Israel, against the U.S., this is, as you say, the kind of model that you could get in exchange. That would reassure the markets, and it would also show, that would be Trump showing the world that here's how he's going to employ his political power.
But it's interesting, though, because Israel did drop its tariffs the day before the announcement, right? And yet the U.S. still slapped these tariffs on Israel. So you have the tariff situation. Iran, of course, we were just talking about that with Congressman Zinke. And there's also the shooting of the Palestinian-American teens in the West Bank, with one dying as a result, and the killing of more than a dozen Palestinian emergency medics in Gaza by the Israelis. How much do you think that will cast a shadow over this meeting today?
I just don't think it'll come up that much.
Really?
Perhaps the Palestinian-American issue will come up, and I think the Israeli leader will have his defense lined up that they were engaging in some sort of activity, throwing stones. And you're not going to see the kind of dressing down behind closed doors, at least, that you would have seen in the Biden administration. The signal has been all along taking the IDF side, believing the IDF version of events, and the IDF has come out with the version of events over the weekend that some of those medics, that half of them, when their names were run against intelligence lists, were allegedly members of Hamas. So I expect that the White House will take those claims at face value and move on, because at this point, they are supporting Netanyahu in increasing the military pressure on Hamas by dividing up Gaza into military zones again to try to get the hostages out.
Kimberly Dozier, thanks very, very much.
All right, just ahead on this very busy Monday, communities underwater, but the flooding danger hasn't passed in parts of my home state of Kentucky. Up next, we'll find out what's being done to help folks who have just lost everything and are really struggling right now.
Welcome back.
Have I got news for you? News Saturday on CNN.
For plant-based, healthy blood pressure support, there's one brand that stands above the rest. It's SuperBeets by Human, the #1 doctor, pharmacist, and cardiologist recommended beet brand for heart health support. Find out how to get a free month with your first order at livehuman.com.
CIDP is no walk in the park.
That's true.
But I take Vyvgart Hytrulo.
Same. It's the first major innovation in CIDP treatment in over 30 years.
Vyvgart Hytrulo has been proven to significantly reduce the risk of symptoms getting worse.
And my CIDP can be treated with once-weekly injections that take about 30 to 90 seconds.
Do not use Vyvgart Hytrulo if you have a serious allergy to any of its ingredients. Serious allergic reactions like trouble breathing and decrease in blood pressure leading to fainting, and allergic reactions such as rashes, swelling under the skin, shortness of breath, and hives have been reported. The most common side effects are respiratory and urinary tract infections, headache, and injection site reactions. It may increase the risk of infusion-related reactions and infection. Tell your doctor if you have a history of infections or symptoms of an infection.
I'm hitting fairways with the fellas.
I'm hitting the road with my #1.
That's
how we live vividly with Vyvgart Hytrulo.
Visit livevividly.com or talk to your neurologist.
Known for creating memories. No one wants to be known for cancer, but a treatment can be. Keytruda is known to treat cancer. FDA approved for 18 types of cancer, including certain early stage and advanced cancers. One of those cancers is a kind of bladder and urinary tract cancer called advanced urothelial cancer. Keytruda may be used with the medicine enfortumab vedotin in adults when your bladder or urinary tract cancer has spread or cannot be removed by surgery.
Keytruda can cause your immune system to attack healthy parts of your body during or after treatment. This may be severe and lead to death. See your doctor right away if you have cough, shortness of breath, chest pain, diarrhea, severe stomach pain, nausea or vomiting, headache, light sensitivity, eye problems, irregular heartbeat, extreme tiredness, constipation, dizziness or fainting, changes in appetite, thirst or urine, confusion, memory problems, persistent or severe muscle pain or weakness, muscle cramps, fever, rash, itching or flushing. There may be other side effects. Tell your doctor about all medical conditions, including immune or nervous system problems, such as Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, lupus, or myasthenia gravis, or Guillain-Barré syndrome, an organ, tissue, or stem cell transplant, or receive chest radiation. Keytruda can harm your unborn baby.
Keytruda is an immunotherapy and is also being studied in hundreds of clinical trials exploring ways to treat even more types of cancer. It's true, Keytruda. See all the types of cancer Keytruda is known for at Keytruda.com and ask your doctor if Keytruda could be right for you.
Son's a sweet dentist on ZocDoc.
Dr. Stafford's a real beauty, and people say he's passionate about dentistry.
Dr. Sales on 33rd Street? We could practically skate there. Booked it.
Sweet.
You've got options. Book now.
All our favorite places are getting more expensive. But it's car repairs that are seeing the biggest increases ever, which is why it's so important to call CarShield now.
It could cost you up to $8,000 to fix a transmission, or up to $10,000 to fix your engine, or up to $2,500 to get your AC repaired. CarShield offers plans to protect up to 5,000 parts and systems.
With CarShield, you get nationwide protection, unlimited miles, month-to-month plans, and with the CarShield guarantee, your low rate stays the same for as long as you cover your car.
Every plan from CarShield includes benefits like 24/7 roadside assistance, courtesy towing, and rental car options.
With so many places to see in this country, CarShield gives drivers freedom to enjoy more of it worry-free. Just don't wait until it's too late. Call now before a breakdown.
Call CarShield now and get the CarShield guarantee, where your rate never goes up and your coverage never goes down. Call 800-940-7454.
Closed captioning brought to you by Mesobook.com.
If you or a loved one have mesothelioma, we'll send you a free book to answer questions you may have. Call now and we'll come to you.
800-821-4000.
We are tracking new fallout from President Trump's trade war, fears of a recession as tariffs rattle the global economy. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Morgan McCarvey of Kentucky. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, the first question is the obvious question, right? What impacts are these tariffs already having in your district, or just the fear of what might happen?
Yeah, I think the impacts are massive. You know, if you live in Kentucky, if you live in Louisville, Kentucky, where I live,
you know somebody who works in the bourbon industry. These aren't far off economic terms like tariff and retaliation and markets going up and down. This is somebody wondering down the street if they're going to have their job next week. And so we're seeing that already, but we don't have to guess what's going to happen. We've seen what happened. When Trump was president the first time, he did the same thing. He had massive tax cuts, he put tariffs in place, and the bourbon industry was devastated. Cut our exports in half with Trump's previous tariffs. And those tariffs weren't as big as the tariffs he's proposing now. So I think it's going to be absolutely devastating for the industry.
Yeah, the bourbon industry is just such a big industry in Kentucky, and you have to wonder about the ripple effect, right? If they're impacted, the jobs and what's going to happen in my beloved home state right there. Yeah. You know, the president, he is sort of saying, look, everyone, there's going to be some short-term pain because this is going to lead to a manufacturing renaissance here in the U.S. and really incentivize people to buy American. Are you seeing any evidence that that could happen? I mean, can you see the good in that?
Yeah, look, I want manufacturing jobs in the United States. I want more manufacturing jobs in the United States. But again, look at what happened when Trump did this the first time. Manufacturing actually declined. Then under the Biden administration, it picked up again because, you know, tariffs, when we talk about tariffs, tariffs are neither good nor bad. Tariffs are a tool. A hammer is neither good nor bad. It's good for putting a nail in the wall. It's not so good for fixing your iPad. How you use these tariffs matters. And so if you're using tariffs in a targeted way with policies like saying, hey, we want more semiconductor chips built here in the United States for manufacturing purposes, for national security purposes. So we're going to put policies in place that incentivize it, and we're going to put a tariff on this industry to further encourage to buy these chips in America. That's the kind of thing that works. It leads to more jobs. It leads to better production here at home. But when you just throw these tariffs across the board and on our allies, right? I understand why we're putting tariffs on China. They're competing unfairly. They're adversaries of ours. But these across-the-board tariffs on our allies where we are doing good trade, this did not work when Trump was president the first time. The markets are saying it's not going to work this time. There's no reason to think it's going to work.
And the Trump administration has argued, well, look, when we did this the first time, that, you know, inflation didn't really go up. It held steady. But this clearly is different. This is much more aggressive. And I think you're seeing it in the markets right now, the volatility and the uncertainty kind of fueling that, of what this means. And you have lawmakers also pushing to reclaim congressional authority over tariffs. Do you think there's enough bipartisan support for something like that to pass with a veto-proof majority?
I would certainly hope so. You saw it pass on a bipartisan basis in the Senate. I don't think Mike Johnson is going to bring it up for a vote in the House. And maybe because there is a fear it would pass. I mean, look, you know, the Trump administration is out there defending these policies, as I guess they have to do right now, but they cannot defend what happened the first time. Again, manufacturing went down, the trade deficit increased, and the national debt increased with their policies under the last time they tried this. There's no reason to think it's going to be different this time.
And there was a manufacturing, a mild recession, you're right, and I believe in the fall of 2019, when Trump was in office the first time, when it came to the manufacturing industry. So I want to also ask you about something else that's going on in Kentucky, and that's these devastating storms there. We're seeing the images of all the flooding. Give us an update on the ground. Is Kentucky getting the help that it needs?
Yeah, I mean, we've been battered. And not just the storms this last week. There were storms in parts of the state a couple of weeks ago with really bad flooding. These are awful. I'm a lifelong Kentuckian, lifelong Louisvillian. I don't think I've ever seen it this bad. We've already lost 2 Kentuckians to this. We know that the Ohio River is not expected to crest until probably Wednesday, maybe Thursday of this week. You're looking at the 97 flood levels, and some parts of the state, they're comparing it to the flood of 37, which if you're a Kentucky kid, you've always heard people talk about the flood of 37. It's really devastating. It's damaging. And no, I mean, this is where, you know, policy sometimes has to meet the people. And so when you're talking about making cuts to the National Weather Service, we don't have people on the ground in Louisville that were able to confirm the tornadoes that touched down in Louisville last week. We're not getting what we need, I think, necessarily from those services. But the president did work with our governor, Andy Beshear, to make sure that there is a federal declaration declared. We can start opening up those funds. And I know the Kentucky delegation will be united on trying to get Kentucky the help it needs.
Just to follow up on that, the National Weather Service did say that it wouldn't be able to survey the damage and confirmed that suspected tornadoes for several days due to the staffing issues. Do you know, though, if it's because of the cuts the Trump administration made, or they said in a statement that a lot of people are on spring break and off right now, and that is why? But we're trying to get a better sense.
Well, in Kentucky, they've had a 35% reduction in staff because of these budget cuts. And so, yes, it was spring break in a lot of parts of Kentucky last week, spring break in parts of Kentucky this week. But there's been a 35% cut there. And I talked to officials in Louisville who directly blame this on some of the staffing cuts.
And what are the consequences of that? Help us better understand.
I mean, we need to have people out there to confirm what's happened, to know what's happened, to warn in advance of what's happening. And so what ended up happening in Louisville, because we didn't have the National Weather Service, we had to send county emergency people out there who work from Jefferson County to say whether there were tornadoes. By doing that, they weren't doing the other jobs that they could do to give people the help they need in this type of disaster.
And when the river crests, what are you expecting?
Yeah, I mean, when the Ohio River crests, and so many of our population centers in Kentucky are still along the Ohio River, just based on how people originally got to the state. There will be probably some people forced out of their homes, certainly road closures. I mean, I can tell you right now, my kids are off school today because of the flooding. There's no reason to think that's going to change in the coming days. Lots of kids off of school. You know what that means for parents and child care. Lots of homes that are damaged. I mean, we lived in our house for 18 years. It's the first time we remember having this type of water in our basement in Louisville, Kentucky. And we're lucky. I mean, we're so lucky because we live a little bit away from the river. So, people close are experiencing much, much worse.
All right, Congressman Morgan McGarvey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And good luck to all the folks in Kentucky. A great, great state indeed. All right, guys, thank you. Coming up, for the men, one game left to win it all. CNN sports anchor Coy Wire is in San Antonio as the Florida Gators and the Houston Cougars are set to face off in the men's basketball final.
Yes, Wolf, we're here on the beautiful Riverwalk in San Antonio, soaking in some of the calm before the chaos of tonight's national title game. The Gators, the Cougars going toe-to-toe in one last dance. We caught up with both head coaches to get their thoughts on the big moment. We'll have that in a preview coming up.
All the most powerful leaders are at the G20 summit. Now we gotta go save the world.
I've taken the G20 by force. We will reset the world's financial markets.
My husband and kids are missing. We have to find them.
And now you're Captain America. That was quite well done.
G20, rated R, April 10th, only on Prime.
Every breath you take, every move you make, every day you wake, make no mistake, we'll be helping you. Every breath you take.
Introducing 2 new Baja Chipotle subs featuring our world-famous Baja Chipotle sauce. Listen, that's the Baja Chipotle talking. Well, it's actually me talking, but you know what I mean. Find your fresh with the new Baja Chipotle collection.
That's for a whole year. I'm talking about no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest until April of 2026.
But I think that he sort of walked back on that. But the market doesn't believe him. The market thinks that he's going to capitulate soon enough because that's been the Fed's track record for the last couple of decades. And at the first sign of economic trouble, they tend to capitulate. They did that last September and even before that with SVB, but there's a long history of the Fed having capitulated and the fact that the Fed has missed its inflation target now for 5 years in a row and will do so for another 2 years. So I'm really surprised in a way as to where the market is pricing in these rate cuts, but also sort of understand it because that's been the Fed's track record going back the last few years, if not decades.
Right. So now we have the situation where the Fed is a little bit handicapped. We have global, you're a very global guy. So let's just talk about what's happening overseas. Hong Kong falling 13% overnight, the worst day since the Asian financial crisis. What's going to happen to global growth?
No, obviously global growth is going to take a hit, but I think that at the end of what's going on here and something we've spoken about as well is that the rest of the world is laser focused now on trading without America. So what's happening there is that they're sort of expediting their trade deals of trading with each other, as I've sort of written in the past as well, that if you look at the 10 fastest growing trade routes in the world, only 2 now involve America. 5 involves China and other countries. So the world is moving on, but obviously in the short term, everybody gets hit. But this is a very different kind of market reaction and even downturn that, as you know, that this time, even after the carnage in the international markets over the last couple of days, the US market has really underperformed, and the dollar, in fact, has weakened through this all. So these are already two very different reaction functions to what we've seen in the past. And you just pointed out the treasury yields as well. I think that's a great point you made, because the sensitivity analysis that we had done some time back showed that if there is a US recession, the deficit will widen to 8 to 9% of GDP. Now, what sort of yields should that bring about? Higher yields, I would imagine, not lower yields. So this is a very different environment, and looking at history here may be quite misleading, as we're already seeing in the market's reactions.
Rashir, I'm interested in, somehow we're going to hopefully get some resolution, quote unquote, on what the tariff rates are and what negotiations look like. But I am curious to know your thoughts about the scarring of credibility to the U.S. and what that does to its ability to draw capital from around the world.
I think it's very significant, partly because, Carl, we went into this with the U.S. being the most overhyped, overowned, and overvalued market in history relative to the rest of the world. That never before had so much capital flown to the U.S. 80% of all flows into the stock market globally went into just the U.S. market this decade. So there's a lot of unwind of that which has to happen, and a lot of that capital came in unhedged, expecting the dollar to appreciate. So that's why, that was something that we discussed was the mother of all bubbles, and that bubble is now being pricked. But this credibility damage is going to last, and I suspect that over the next few years, the U.S. stock market and U.S. assets are going to underperform, no matter how this tariff drama is resolved.
Rashir, thank you very much for weighing in. I will note that, Carl, even though we have seen stocks sell off again after the White House shot down the 90-day, asset headline, if they're not at the lows, they're certainly, it's not as bad as it had looked. The Dow is only down 350 points, so, there's something there.
Stacks up.
And even heading into that headline, we were off the lows. Treasury yields have turned around. Like there's definitely something happening, whether it's just they got overdone or what?
Yeah, we'll see. VIX now with a 4 handle instead of a 5. Let's bring in Bapasani.
So what's happening is it stopped going down, okay, and that's the good thing. And I think while the market may move on this particular news it moved on, there is some vague hope that the Europeans might be offering to negotiate somehow. I think that's what the market's clinging to right now. That's the vague hope here and why we stopped going down. But the damage has already been done. You guys have been talking about strategists reducing estimates. I've been looking at the analysts. These are the bottoms, not the top-down people, the bottoms-up numbers, and their numbers have been cutting rather dramatically in the first quarter. I look at some of these material stocks, Freeport, Nucor, Dow. These numbers are getting cut dramatically in the last few weeks, and you can see look what happened to Freeport over here. Freeport, 42 to 30 in the last couple of weeks, and the estimates have been dramatically cut on higher costs. Nucor went from 123 to 105. It's way down the last few weeks. So the material estimates have dramatically come down. This is one sector where there's really material movement in the bottoms-up strategist move. There's Nucor. It was 123 just a few days ago. Now it's 105. If you look at other sectors like consumer discretionary, again, I look at analysts, not so much strategists. These are the bottoms-up people who actually do the daily work in the market. You look at stocks like Ford, just absolutely the estimates are collapsing on Ford. We're negative here for the first quarter. It was dramatically higher, and Ford is dramatically lower. It's like that's like close to a 4-year low on Ford. We're not that far away. Other big names in the consumer discretionary place, Caesars has been down really near a 5-year low. Norwegian, all of these have had their earnings estimates cut rather dramatically. So the damage is already happening in the market, and all we're waiting to do is sort of spread out into other areas like technology and communication services. Finally, I was asked a lot about what this 20% decline actually means. I just want to show a technical number here, because the high that we hit a little while ago was 61.44. The February 19th high was 61.44. This is the closing high. This is how S&P Dow Jones does this. So to get 20% below that, we must close at 49.15. There's your magic number. And this comes from S&P. So again, it's closing numbers, not intraday, that actually matter in the long run. And to have a true 20% decline, we need to close at 49.15.32. Obviously, we're a little bit above that. But this morning, we were essentially sitting right in that particular neighborhood. So there's your game right here. 20%, we're essentially sitting there. And hopes, maybe some vague hopes, on not a lot, that maybe the Europeans will negotiate.
One thing that I think is so stunning is how wrong all the macro traders and the forecasts were going into the year. Remember the popular trades? Buy stocks, really bullish on the Trump growth agenda. Sell bonds because it's going to be a little inflationary, and buy the dollar and all these tariffs. All three of those have gone completely wrong in such a short time period, which I think makes this worse.
Well, we have talked for years how bad forecasting is with strategists and analysts, but here's something nobody could have actually forecast. I wouldn't hold them against them for getting it all wrong on this one.
This was unmodelable.
They get a pass on this.
It's just causing a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Speaking of pain, though, we are, as Sarah's mentioned, well off the lows. In fact, we're up on both the NASDAQ and the S&P. Not nearly as high as we were on what were those erroneous headlines earlier about a 90-day pause, but nonetheless well off where we were when we opened the session only an hour and a half ago. Feels like a full day's already taken place. We got a lot more live market coverage for you straight ahead.
QX80, you are cleared for takeoff.
Why go commercial when you can have all the comforts of private? The all-new Infiniti QX80.
Let's start the bidding at $5 million.
Robinhood Gold members get a 3% IRA match. Where the wealthy hoard their perks, our retirement contributions are boosted by 3%. Now with Robinhood Gold.
Your record label is taking off, but so is your sound engineer. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Our advanced matching helps find talented candidates so you can connect with them fast.
Bien, sonido, sonido, sonido. Ok, en esta cobertura especial se está presentando un desplome de los mercados financieros, como pueden observar. Y esto sucedió desde el día de ayer. Desde el día de ayer que se produjo una fuerte caída de los mercados financieros. De hecho, ya estuve informando en mis redes sociales de la caída de las acciones de Europa y de Asia. Y como pueden ver en el gráfico, hay una gran volatilidad. Una gran volatilidad. De hecho, están en tendencias Wall Street, lunes negro. Acá como pueden ver. Le están sacando muchos memes a Donald Trump. Obviamente de las políticas arancelarias que muchos lo están comparando con el lunes negro de 1929, antes de la Gran Depresión. Entonces, como pueden observar, hay una fuerte incertidumbre en la economía. Una fuerte incertidumbre que la verdad no sé mucho economía. No sé nada de economía, pero era obvio que esto iba a suceder. De hecho, el presidente Trump ya publicó varios tweets acerca de lo que está pasando. Vamos a leerlo, traducirlo. Acá dice la cuenta oficial de Donald Trump. Dice que los precios del petróleo han bajado, las tasas de interés han bajado. La lenta Reserva Federal debería recortarlas. Los precios de los alimentos han bajado. No hay inflación. Y Estados Unidos, maltratado durante tanto tiempo, recibe miles y miles de millones de dólares semanales de los países buscadores con aranceles ya vigentes. Esto a pesar de que el mayor buscador de todo, China, cuyos mercados se están desplomando, acaba de aumentar sus aranceles 34%, además de los aranceles ridículamente altos a lo largo y más sin atender mi advertencia. A los países abusadores de no tomar represalias ya han ganado bastante durante décadas aprovechándose del buen y viejo Estados Unidos. Nuestros antiguos líderes son los culpables de permitir que esto y tantas otras cosas le suceden a nuestro país. Hagamos que Estados Unidos sea grande de nuevo. Pues no lo sé, pues. De hecho, ya está aumentando las posibilidades de una recesión. Incluso, si notan en el gráfico el color verde, del gráfico puntero del color verde, eso se debió a que circulaba un rumor que se descartó rápidamente porque volvió a desplomarse todo. El rumor era de que la Casa Blanca decía que iba a pausar los aranceles por 90 días, lo cual la Casa Blanca lo desmintió. Así que se volvió a desplomar todo. Entonces,
no sé si estas políticas arancelarias, o posiblemente sí, están afectando a la economía mundial en general. Entonces así está la situación de la economía. De hecho, acá, desde el día de ayer, se produjo una fuerte caída de las criptomonedas y las caídas de las bolsas de Asia y Europa. Entonces, hay como un remesón económico bastante importante, que ya pronostican que se avecina una recesión. Si las cosas continúan como están, posiblemente. Entonces, así están las bolsas de los mercados. Esto es en tiempo real, en vivo, las noticias de Estados Unidos. También del día de hoy habrá una reunión con el primer ministro de Israel, Netanyahu, que ya llegó a Washington. Supongo que ya para discutir qué van a hacer con Irán. Pero eso ya es otro tema. Ya es otro tema. Y así están los mercados financieros. Siguen desplomándose. A pesar de que tuvo un repunte hace unos momentos, o hace, creo que, un tiempo. Y eso se debió al rumor de que Trump iba a considerar pausar los aranceles por 90 días, lo cual ya se descartó, se desmintió. Y volvió a desplomarse los mercados. No lo sé, vamos a ver si ese rumor era cierto o era falso. El caso es que en este desplome, en esta incertidumbre económica, alguien tiene que ceder. Yo creo que el objetivo de Donald Trump es hacer ceder a los países, a quitar los aranceles a Estados Unidos, para luego Trump quitarle los aranceles. O sea, prácticamente Trump busca que los países cedan, más no al revés, no hacer a Estados Unidos que se retracte y que quite los aranceles. Obviamente no. Donald Trump no tiene esa mentalidad. De hecho, ese rumor era falso, de que iba a pausar los aranceles por 90 días. Y Donald Trump va a continuar obviamente, con su política de presionar a los países para que cedan y le quiten los aranceles a Estados Unidos. Yo creo que ese es el objetivo. Pero el problema es que está el riesgo de que la economía, tanto de Estados Unidos como a nivel mundial, se vaya a una recesión económica. Si esto perdura bastante. muestra en Wall Street. Incluso esta caída económica están comparado con la pandemia del COVID. La están comparando con la pandemia del COVID. Vamos a ver cómo. Acá dice en esta publicación de que todos los informes sobre una pausa arancelaria de 90 días son falsos, confirmado por la secretaria de prensa de la Casa Blanca, Caroline Levy. Así que ya está confirmado, ya descartaron y era falso de que iban a pausar los aranceles. Era falso. Entonces acá dice que la Unión Europea afirma estar lista para negociar con Estados Unidos y afirma haber ofrecido aranceles por 0%. Entonces, parece que la Unión Europea está cediendo. No sé si esto sea cierto. Acá dice en otra noticia, Trump, si China no retira su aumento del 34% sobre sus abusos comerciales ya prolongados antes de mañana, 8 de abril de 2025, Estados Unidos le impondrá aranceles adicionales del 50% a partir del 9 de abril. Pues, esto ya es prácticamente la declaración de una guerra comercial entre Estados Unidos y China. Si China no cede y no le quita los aranceles del 34%, Trump le va a imponer aranceles a China del 50% a partir del 9 de abril. Así que esto está bastante tenso. Bastante tenso. Ahí entra lo de la guerra comercial entre Estados Unidos y China. Incluso esto ya es una guerra mundial comercial porque todos los países ya tienen aranceles. Y acá muestra de nuevo que la Casa Blanca desmintió los informes que sugerían que el presidente Trump estaba considerando una suspensión arancelaria de 90 días para todos los países excepto China, calificándolos de falsos. La afirmación inicialmente reportados por CNBC impulsó brevemente la bolsa estadounidense durante aproximadamente una hora antes de volver a caer. Ahí como pueden ver, ahí tuvo un repunte. Ese repunte verde era el rumor de que Trump iba a pausar los aranceles, pero cuando se supo que era falso, se volvió a desplomar todo, volvió a caer.
Pouring cold water on this idea, wherever it came from, that they are considering a 90-day pause on tariffs, saying that the president is committed to his tariff regime, and any reports that he's considering a 90-day pause are, quote, fake news. That from the White House press secretary on the record just a short time ago.
Así está el panorama. Así está el panorama. Entonces acá sí. Entonces ya le dio una advertencia a China si no le quita los aranceles del 34%. Estados Unidos le va a poner aranceles del 50% adicionales a China a partir del 9 de abril. A partir del 9 de abril. Y como pueden ver en el gráfico, sigue desplomándose. Los mercados, ya cuando se enteraron de que el rumor de la pausa de aranceles era falso. Así que eso, la incertidumbre económica continúa. Así quedaron las criptomonedas. Las criptomonedas tuvieron una caída importante. Prácticamente todo el mercado. En Asia también tuvieron caídas económicas. Entonces así está la situación económica. La volatilidad en los mercados. Incluso esto también va a generar más tensión con subirle más aranceles a China. Si China no le retira los aranceles a Estados Unidos, entonces eso se va a volver como una guerra, un tipo de guerra comercial de 2.0.
The impact of that.
What about some of the prognostications? We just heard from Dan Ives, for instance, of Wedbush, who said this is going to put us behind in the race on AI against China. Like serious long-term implications.
I would say too early to sort of say whether that plays out, but the risk of that is very real. You can just kind of imagine the follow-through set of events. All of a sudden, all international trade partners go to China for infrastructure and for AI as opposed to the U.S. because the cost of the U.S.'s offerings is way higher. The U.S. Has a high degree of need for infrastructure components from a lot of these trade partners that we have. Those prices will go up faster than our ability to reshore the manufacturing in the U.S. Interestingly, a lot of the input supplies that we need to reshore manufacturing will actually come from the countries that we're now tariffing. And so you're telling the industrial sector, we need you to build in America. Fine, that makes sense. But now we're going to make the cost of doing so actually higher than any other alternative that you would have. And so that obviously doesn't make any sense. So this puts us at risk. Again, what I think a lot of folks would have done is say, let's lean into the strengths that we have. We are leading in AI. We're leading in global technology. We're leading in life sciences. We have some green shoots in areas like Tesla with self-driving cars and EVs. Double down on all of that. Don't add headwinds and don't add friction in this economy that then slows down and causes the business community to have to deal with a new set of dynamics, as new headwinds.
I know, but I think the president would say that's what he's doing. I mean, he's leaning into all of that, and he's protecting our great tech companies from the Digital Services and Markets Act, which a lot of people think is very protectionist, for instance, in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other, less sort of talked about issues is that when you actually sort of add up all global trade, including digital services, we end up looking leverage that is not specific to just industrial trade policy. And when that gets added into this, which is why I think we're playing with fire with some of the amount that we're negotiating, because there are other tools that other countries and economies have against us as well. There's a lot that could play out from here.
Ya cayó bastante. Ha caído 945 puntos, un 2,47%. El S&P 500, casi no muestran métricas. El S&P 500 ha caído 93 puntos, un 1,83%. El Nasdaq ha caído 242 puntos, un 1,63%. El índice Russell 2000 ha caído un 38,21 puntos, casi el 2,10%.
That's obviously a lot more, optimistic and exciting than some of the headwinds that we're facing right now. So, certainly hoping that we can get back more to that type of conversation soon in the economy.
La volatilidad en la economía mundial.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Aaron Levy from Box. We'll turn to overseas markets. European markets closing just a moment ago. Huge declines here, but also a rally off the lows, like we saw with the U.S. markets. And then we fell back down into negative territory. So again, very volatile trading. The German DAX have been down more than 10%
Donald Trump está en tendencias. Trump está en tendencias.
Before going red again. That's the kind of moves we're talking about. The European Commission president saying, quote, Europe is always ready for a good deal, adding they have offered 0-for-0 tariffs for industrial goods, as we have successfully done with many other trading partners, she says. Maybe that added some hope in the markets that they are coming to the table to negotiate instead of retaliate. In Asia, Chinese markets reopening after being closed on Friday. Hong Kong's Hang Seng led the losses, falling more than 13%. Worst day since the Asian financial crisis. Mainland China's CSI 300 was down 7%, largest one-day drop since October. The Shanghai Composite falling more than 7%. Taiwan getting hit hard. We'll see how they open tomorrow after the president just announced additional 50% tariffs on China if they don't get rid of their retaliatory tariffs. The 34% on the US.
Dice que Estados Unidos impondrá un arancel adicional del 50% a China a partir del miércoles 9 de abril si no se retira los aranceles de China. Como pueden observar.
Earlier in the day, trading of futures actually was suspended at one point after the market hit some key circuit breakers. Carl, we were kind of all on alert for circuit breakers here because we are seeing such sharp declines. What it's telling you is that this is a global growth story and a global growth worry, and that yes, it's a U.S. policy shock and a U.S. trade shock, but clearly there are going to be major reverberations overseas for growth. It's part of the administration's calculation here, and their calculus that they're going to get hurt worse than we are, but I think everybody's getting hurt together right now. Time now for a news update. Pippa Stevens has it for us. Morning, Pippa.
Good morning, Sarah. A federal appeals court ruled today that 2 Democrats fired by President Trump can go back to their jobs. The 7-4 decision overrules a previous judgment from a 3-judge panel from the same court. It comes after the president's abrupt firings of Gwen Wilcox from the National Labor Relations Board and Kathy Harris from the Merit Systems Protections Board. The case appears to be setting up a Supreme Court showdown over the president's power to fire members of independent agencies. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court turned away a challenge to a recently enacted gun law in New York. The measure bans concealed firearms in sensitive locations such as healthcare facilities, churches, and parks.
Ha sido la noticia más relevante.
From a New York appeals court
Por ahora esta ha sido la noticia más relevante. Si sucede otra información de último momento, lo estaré informando. Por ahora continúen con la transmisión en vivo.
Was 73 years old. Carl, back to you.
Pippa, thank you very much. Coming up after the break, Deepwater Asset Management's Gene Munster's with us on this meltdown on the Mag 7, where he sees opportunity in tech with the sector now more than 20% off the 52-week high.
Plus, mentioned earlier, financials. Names are kind of mixed today, coming off their worst week since March of 2020. That was right during COVID. Morgan Stanley downgrades Goldman Sachs on exposure to recession risk, but upgrades Bank of America, citing its valuation after the downturn. Bank earnings start on Friday. It'll be very interesting to hear the tone from those executives. Money Movers will be right back.
Crypto Watch is sponsored by Crypto.com. Crypto.com is America's premier crypto platform.
What does it mean to be rich? Maybe rich is less about reaching a magic number and more about discovering magic. Rich is being able to keep your loved ones close and also send them away. Rich is living life your way and having someone who can help you get there. The key to being rich is knowing what counts.
I'm broke. Replacing kit costs thousands. Not covered by homeowners insurance.
Honey, wake up. Here's Tom Rusin, CEO of HomeServe.
A plan from HomeServe pays for the covered repair cost for water lines, and we send a qualified contractor. The American dream of owning a home doesn't need to be a nightmare. Sleep well with HomeServe.
Plans from HomeServe start at just $4.99 a month.
Call 1-833-812-2142 or visit homeserve.com.
You're drinking too much? Take back control with Or Health. Or Health provides access to medication proven to help. A daily pill to drink less, or to quit drinking altogether. Text CNBC to 710-710 to learn more.
Buying a car is kind of a big deal, but you use the Car Gurus app. That's a price drop alert, so the deals come to you. Oops. Big deals right when you need them. Car Gurus. Download the app today.
Since 2007, Origin has been focused on the future.
A future that helps you build passive income from real estate.
One where we invest by your side without hidden fees or confusing structures.
Build the future you deserve with Origin Investments.
The thing about work, it's always changing. Whether advancements in AI, workplace policies, I&D initiatives, upskilling talent, whatever it is, we all have a work thing in front of us. But with the right perspective, what seems confusing or just out of reach can suddenly fall into place and push you towards achieving your business goals. If it's a work thing, it's a SHRM thing.
SHRM.
We had 3 regular guys try Harry's for the first time.
Wow, this is beautiful.
Yeah, there it is. Smooth. And told them an 8-pack of refills is $17.
Wow. I have to switch razors.
Get started for $7 at harrys.com/shaving.
I'm a supermodel. I used their Baked and Brighten like foundation powder, but I used it over the spackle primer. It was sick. Their squeezy blush and then their In the Buff lip. I'm a model.
Look, great blue heron. You know, when I go, I'd like to leave some money to the local bird conservancy.
Doesn't count. What you need is a will, something you can sign and make official. Start your will at trustandwill.com now and make it count.
I find it challenging to come up with a gift that's really impactful, something that really makes a difference. Jolie has been a tremendous gift. It's something that is not only looks beautiful, but makes us feel amazing, and is something that we get to use every day.
Welcome back to Money Movers. The tech sector among the biggest month-to-date laggards on the S&P. That's, of course, after the Nasdaq closed out last week in a bear market, shedding 22% from those December highs. Downturn comes as much of the Mag 7 gears up to report earnings later this month, as the composite as a whole now down nearly 30% off the all-time high. Apollo this morning pointing out that roughly 50% of the Mag 7's earnings come from abroad. That is higher than the overall S&P's exposure. And joining us this morning is Deepwater Asset Management's managing partner, Gene Munster, talking more about where Mag 7 goes from here. Gene, good to have you back. Good morning.
Good morning.
Interesting times. Is your view about the Mag 7 trade much different than the broad trade right now?
I think that the Mag 7 is still in a great place relative to the broader market, in large part because I still believe in the fundamentals of what's going to happen with AI. I think if we can try to piece through everything that's going on to look at valuations as an important dynamic around that, it's currently trading at a deep discount to the 5-year average. It's basically 31 times next year's numbers. Typically, it's like 41 times over the past 5 years. If you back out Tesla from that, it trades at 22 times versus the 5-year average. We'll call that the Mag 6 of 33 times. So, Carl, when I think about the Mag 7 relative to the broader tech trade, what I zero in on here is that the market effectively is pricing in that estimates are going to get reduced by about 25% this year. Right. And when I think about the probability of that happening, I think it's low. I do think that these companies are at risk. Clearly, if this trade war persists for this year, they will all miss their numbers. But I don't think that they're going to miss them to the magnitude that the street is expecting now, that 25%. My general guess at this point is probably a 10% miss. So back to your question is like, how does the Mag 7 fit into this? If you look at how it's trading relative to its benchmarks, it's trading an attractive valuation, more than what I think that the market's pricing. I think the numbers aren't going to come down as much as the market's pricing. And then, of course, the impact of the AI trade. And I think it's a really important topic. I like how you ended your segment with Aaron earlier and just the importance of AI, because I think that significance really has been moved to a side topic here more recently.
Right. But if the business cycle gets really rough, Gene, and you're right, maybe that it's not a full 25, how do they make up for it? Do CapEx revisions come in? Do we see a new efficiency push from some of them?
Well, I think, first of all, I can make this pretty simple for at least the next 2 weeks for tech traders, is that all you need to think about is what those 4 companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Meta, are going to say about their CapEx, and we'll start there. Last quarter, there was a lot of conversation obviously related to DeepSeek and how that was going to impact what they're going to be spending. At that time, they bumped it up from 20-ish% to more than 40% growth. And so if that number, how that number plays out, is going to have a dramatic impact in terms of how investors think about this AI trade more broadly.
I wonder how much is, you all right? Exposure, yep. Gene, you know, the fact that we went into this where, yes, Mag 7 was weakening through the year, but widely held stocks from hedge funds, from retail, from sovereigns, and now if the whole outlook is changing on the global economy and questions about whether U.S. is really the exceptional place in the world to be from an investment standpoint, just what happens purely on ownership of these stocks?
Well, I think it's going to come back to the fundamentals. I think it's going to come back to, are these companies going to be the leaders? And ultimately, I think that is going to play forward. I think that what we're going to see in terms of what they're building of AI infrastructure, in terms of how they're providing products that are going to, I think, make companies more efficient and products that consumers are going to increasingly want, I think these companies are still going to be at the center of that innovation piece. I do believe, so I think that those companies are going to continue to do exceptionally well. And so this conversation about ultimately how does the U.S. play and kind of work with other countries and what are outside investors going to want to, are they going to want to invest in the U.S. and continue to support these large companies? I think at the end of the day is they're going to want to buy the companies that are the most transformative. I think they're going to continue to hold that position. And so I still feel good about relative to how that they're going to be pushing this future. And I just want to put a finer point on this, is that when we think about the AI trade more broadly and think about the context to what it means for not only the tech paradigm shift, but economies more broadly and just the whole geopolitical conversation, this is something that's going to be impacting our lives for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I think these conversations around tariffs are probably going to be impacting our lives for the next 6 to 12 months. And so ultimately, if these companies continue that edge, continue to hold that edge of innovation, which I think that they broadly will, they're going to continue to do well. I do want to put one caveat on there, is that we have recently sold our Google position.
I was going to ask you about this.
Yes. And so this is a company, I mean, as an analyst, I followed this company forever. As an investor, we've invested in it for a long time and was a huge believer that their 2.5 billion daily users around search was giving them unique data. But the more work we've done around Google and specifically around the search page results, we've come to this place where I think it's going to be progressively difficult for the company to land on a monetization model that's compelling. And specifically is they have to kind of strip out all this noise. Right now, when you go to do a Google search, it kind of looks like a 7th grade science project that's just gone awry with your generated results at the top. You got your blue links and then your organic links. And what people want that are using generative AI is a very simple answer. And even though we talk about generative AI a lot, very few people actually use it on a daily basis. If you look at OpenAI's numbers, it's probably 300 million. If you look at kind of juice up the rest of the players out there, maybe it's 500 million globally a day. But again, versus 2.5 billion search results. So there's still this piece where I think that most people don't understand the benefit of doing search around generative AI. And I think that dynamic is going to start to make it difficult for Google. I'm not expecting the company to miss numbers in any quarter. It's going to take a year, 2, 3 years for this to play out. But as we just think about that broader dynamic, we just have lost some confidence in Google.
Yep. We've been talking about existential risk to search for, well, the better part of a year now in the wake of some of these competing technologies. Gene, appreciate that. We haven't had a lot of time to do single stock issues, but that's a good one. It's good to see you again.
Appreciate one just real quick one, kind of a date to keep an eye on. This sounds crazy, but kind of a fun topic to end on. Keep an eye on Trump's birthday and Xi's birthday, June 14th and 15th. It sounds crazy, but there may be something kind of, if you think about their egos and think about how this tariff thing plays out, it's the big one, U.S.-China.
What, like a joint birthday party? Doesn't sound likely.
You know,
given who they are, again, it sounds absurd, but at the end of the day, there could be, look for that as some sort of a potential pressure releaser from all these the tariffs. I think it's still going to be going on a long time between U.S. and China. I'll just say months here, we're going to still be in store, but just kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
Okay. Did not realize that they had back-to-back birthdays. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you.
Gene Munster. By the way, communication services as a sector is higher still, and we are seeing some of those strengths in some of those names that Gene mentioned. Meta, for instance, is up almost 2%. Netflix is up about 1%. So potentially some dip buyers coming in with those stocks. All the other sectors are in the red, and the S&P is down 0.8%, which really does look tame given the magnitude of the sell-offs that we've had lately over the past week. S&P down more than 10%. Let's hit on commodities. We showed you oil prices. They're among the biggest movers in the recent downturn. Crude oil sliding again today. We're at $60.91 on WTI crude, more than 3%. Now slightly off those lows, coming after the WTI crude oil price posted its worst day since July 2022. So what's next for the price of commodities amid all this volatility? Joining us now is Citigroup Global Head of Commodities Research, Max Layton. Max, crude oil has sold off very sharply as a result of all of this new tariff regime, the weakening global economic outlook. What do you think is priced in at this point?
Yeah, we're certainly not recommending any of our clients buy crude oil here, or copper for that matter. Risk-exposed commodities, you know, they've got a lot of room to continue to move lower over. If it doesn't happen this week, it's going to happen this month. These are physical commodity markets. They're not just impacted by financial flows. And the pause in economic activity at best that's going to happen globally as the tariffs just kicked in on Friday, and we've got further tariffs kicking in on Wednesday. The real world activity is only just starting to slow down, only just starting to result in what we think will be an overshoot, a significant near-term surplus in things like copper and Brent, which eventually will potentially provide a really good buying opportunity. But now the next leg is, for us, almost certainly lower.
Gold not acting like a good safe haven if you're worried about all this right now. It's down 1%. It had outperformed going into the tariff announcement. What do you do there?
Yeah, gold's tricky. I mean, it tends to do extremely well into the event or the shock or the recession or the downturn. It doesn't do so well, although it significantly outperforms. I mean, I'm sure gold percentage-wise has been outperforming many equities. And is highly likely to have even outperformed, oil and copper just in the last couple of days in percentage terms. And that's kind of normal, when you have these kind of big events, these shocks. And then what it tends to do is once you get that policy support kick in, whether it's like a material Trump put whereby some of this tariff revenue is redistributed in tax cuts, whether it's material Fed put, the Fed stepping in and underwriting broader risk here, then gold will do really well again. So I think, going into the kind of shock, it does really well, doesn't do particularly great during it, but then it roars out of it.
Max, we had a discussion this morning about copper and whether it's signaling anything in the way of a nascent push for capital investment or hard infrastructure creation. What would you say about that right now?
Sure. So copper's come down around $1,200 over the last week or so. I mean, a really material move for copper. However, it is actually only flat, well, maybe down 2% over the last 3 months. So we've had this big round trip in copper. And considering the shift in global economic activity that's going to happen even just in the next few weeks, I would say copper needs to be materially lower than it is today. It looks like there's been some support in the market, happened around, the China Open, and there's, some suggestion that maybe China's been supporting copper prices today. That's just anecdotal, but I think we're headed to $8,000 in short, in short over the next week or two, I think.
All right, Max, thanks for weighing in on the why. Especially some of these commodities are moving so sharply. Max Layton.
Meantime, mega-cap tech stocks losing nearly $2 trillion of value last week. We'll talk about what's at stake this week and how do valuations compare to the sell-off when we had COVID when we come back.
It's a smart move to get a second opinion. You do it when you're looking for a contractor. You definitely do it with medical advice. So why not with your stock market investments? We can help you see opportunities you may be missing. At Henyon & Walsh, it only takes a second to schedule your free second opinion. So what's there to lose? Speak to Henyon & Walsh, the second opinion people.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol Turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Wow, looks like your hiring's making a lot of people happy.
ZipRecruiter's new tool, Zip Intro, is a game changer. It saved me so many steps in the hiring process. Look, I just pick a time and it handles everything, from finding great candidates to setting up interviews.
So, no more back and forth?
Right. I can just choose from this list and meet with them as soon as tomorrow. Oh, wow. Another dignified portrait of me.
Zip Intro. Post jobs today. Talk to qualified candidates tomorrow. Try it free. Only at ZipRecruiter.com/CNBC.
What if you could invest in a future where skin cancer treatment is non-invasive and relatively painless? Medicus Pharma's groundbreaking solution delivers chemotherapy directly to the tumor site, offering a mostly painless alternative to invasive surgeries. With the skin cancer treatment market expected to exceed $20 billion by 2030, Medicus is poised to meet the demand for cost-effective, non-surgical options. Now advancing Phase 2 studies. Medicus Pharma, leading the charge in skin cancer innovation.
Silver is at a 10-year high. Kootenai Silver boasts one of the largest resources owned by a junior company. With the new high-grade discovery in Mexico, the potential for growth and leverage to silver is significant. Kootenai Silver.
Me away!
Epic Universe at Universal Orlando Resort.
I'm a supermodel. I used their Baked and Brighten like foundation powder, but I used it over the spackle primer. It was sick. Their squeezy blush, and then their In the Buff lip. I'm a model.
I'm Dr. Shannon Klingman, the inventor of whole body deodorant like Mando. It's clinically proven to block odor all day and controls odor for 72 hours. Mando's unique formula stops odor before it starts. That's my secret to better odor control everywhere.
Inflation and economic uncertainty have affected all of us. But if you have a structured settlement or annuity, J.G. Wentworth can help you get a lump sum of cash now in exchange for some or all of your future payments. J.G. Wentworth has helped individuals get over $290 million in the past year alone. So why live month to month in these uncertain economic times? Call J.G. Wentworth today at 877-CASH-NOW and get the cash you need now from your structured settlement. Call now.
Tech Check is sponsored by Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
Volatile session for the markets, and the NASDAQ in particular now teetering on the edge of negative as investors look for any type of safety. That's what our Deirdre Bosa is looking at today. Lessons from previous downturns in today's Tech Check. Hey, Dee.
Hey, good morning, Call. It has been total whipsaw, especially for the Mag 7 this morning, which jumped some 11% from its lows on those pausing headlines before falling back into negative territory. We're now down about 1 1/10%. But here's the bigger picture. Nearly $2 trillion of market value was wiped out in 2 days alone last week. The Nasdaq's worst weekly drop in 5 years. So here's where mega cap valuations stand today. Nvidia, Google, Amazon, they're cheaper on a forward price to earnings basis now than they were at COVID lows. But the 2022 tech valuation reset that actually hit these ratios even harder. All of the Mag 7, except for Nvidia and Amazon, they have higher multiples today, telling us that the recent sell-off, while sharp, hasn't fully unraveled that sort of 5-year historical premium. Now, keep in mind, ChatGPT came out near the end of 2022, and that led to an AI-fueled boom for mega cap tech. The fact that we are getting close to 2022 PE lows means that even the AI premium is now getting eroded. Now, last week, we talked about the impact of tariffs on data centers, which hinges on a steady supply of chips, networking hardware, and raw materials. All of those are going to be affected by tariffs. But beyond that, there's already mixed momentum in the space. Over the weekend, Meta released a new Llama model, but Sam Altman, he also warned that ChatGPT will be delayed. Google, meanwhile, is holding its next cloud event this week. We will hear from Cloud Chief Thomas Kurian and CEO Sundar Pichai on how they plan to catch up with the other hyperscalers. And there's this idea that because Google is positioned all across the different layers of AI, they have a real opportunity here. But key question this week, will they reiterate CapEx with AI spend now caught in the crosshairs of newly announced tariffs? It is a big question that could have major implications for the mega cap trade at large. Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, they all issued CapEx guidance in a pre-Liberation Day tariff world. So how much will $75 billion in Google's case or $80 billion for Microsoft? How much will that now get them in terms of infrastructure? Something I hear increasingly, guys, is that 2025 spend, that may stay intact, but the big questions are around 2026 when you could see them come down. And we've, heard some of that indication from Microsoft, a little bit of cold water on all of this spend.
Okay, Deirdre, thank you very much for keeping track of all of it for us. Keeping our eye on the markets here, we are only down 600 points on the Dow. We were down 1,500. Well, I mean, it's true. Opened up down 1,500, and that's the kind of magnitude we've been used to over the last few trading days. Went all the way positive on that erroneous headline from Reuters that Kevin Hassett was talking about consideration of a 90-day pause on tariffs, which the White House then shot down to us as fake news. Okay, we got rid of that. I mean, it's just been exhausting, and it shows you how jittery the market really is right now. I just want to point out what's happening with treasuries as well, because this has been something going on all morning long, which is that treasuries are being sold and yields are higher, which is the opposite of what we saw over the last few days as the market ran quickly to price in recession and Fed cuts and all of that. What's happening now, whether that just got overbought, in terms of the bonds or what, just something that people are watching and a little bit worried about, because when you are talking about credibility of U.S. assets, and during this hour, President Trump threatened China with another 50% tariffs. I mean, when you're talking about, China's one of our largest creditors.
I know where you're going with this. Yes.
$800 billion worth of U.S. treasuries. We do not want to see this trade war morph into a capital war. We do not want to see the weaponization of U.S. treasuries and the U.S. dollar. That's where we don't want it to go. But when we are talking about, tough positions, digging in on both sides, that has to be something that investors are worried about.
What's the percentage of non-U.S. holders of Treasury ex-Fed?
I don't have the exact percentage, but it's high. I mean,
it is high.
And China's right up there with Japan and a lot of others, trading partners of ours. Right now, it's focused on goods and trade deficits. We don't want it focused on Treasury holdings.
With that in mind, let's get to Post 9 and the Judge.
Okay, Carl, thank you very much. Welcome to the Halftime Report. I'm Scott Wapner, front and center this hour. Trump's trade war wiping trillions of dollars in value from these markets in just a few days. We will assess the damage now, debate what is next. With the Investment Committee, of course. Joining me for the hour today, Joe Terranova, Brian Belsky, Jim Lebenthal. Also with us on set today at Post 9, senior market commentator Mike Santoli. We will show you the markets. We have had, as you probably know by now, the biggest intraday move since early 2020, from bottom to top, 8%. It's been extraordinary. It's been volatile. It's changing by the minute. So continue to watch the majors, and we'll continue to bring you up to date on what is happening. Joe, what's on your mind?
Treacherous, that's the word. The environment of today is an awful environment. It's an awful environment for an investor. It's an awful environment for anyone that's trying to trade this market. The last couple of days, yes, there were opportunities as it relates to trading. There are certainly opportunities for long-term investors who do not believe that what the future will look like is going to look like something we saw in the 2000s when we had a lost decade. But what we are seeing today, when you have that 7% swing, when you've had the deleveraging that you've had over the last several days, what happens after that deleveraging? A lot of hedge funds, a lot of institutional speculators, they step to the sidelines. And what you're greeted with is a type of a market environment where you have today where you think you potentially get an all-clear signal, and then you're just whipsawing all over the place. So what do you do in that environment? I think you really have to study how much risk you have in equities and bonds and the totality of your portfolio. And if you're beyond the boundaries of where your comfort level is, I think you have to retreat on that, because you cannot have strong conviction about either direction right now, given this treacherous environment.
All right, Tom Lee, we got Tariff Liberation Day wrong. Yeah, you did. We want to apologize, as the terms of Tariff Liberation Day were far worse than we expected. Morgan Stanley, be prepared for another 7 to 8% potential downside. Krinsky's talking about the 200-week moving average, that's 46.74, as being major support. You know, Mike, I'm curious, you've seen so many markets and you've seen a lot of volatile markets over the course of your career. What do you make of this one and the way that we've had this price action today?
I think a lot of those folks who are trying to use whatever process to come up with some kind of structural, maybe we've done enough to the downside, it does settle out not too far below where the overnight futures were, like kind of 46, 47, 4,800. And that kind of takes you back to the beginning of 2022. And I think it is very relevant that we haven't seen this kind of intraday action since early 2020, because it is that kind of complete disjunction, right? It was essentially the market was trying to handicap, you know, a process. The process was completely thrown off by an off-the-charts, basically interruption in the world economy, and that's what happened in 2020. And then what you're left with is trying to figure out if we're getting to a level of being washed out to where it doesn't matter what the news is. You know, we had the latest post from the president, people saying, wow, the market took it well, that he said another 50% on China. Well, one, that's a preposterous number. The market recognizes that once you're getting up to these levels, it doesn't matter. But also, he said, negotiations are happening with other countries. Do we care? Do we not care? Is it just the market reacting to itself right now?
Do we even believe it?
Right,
because you get the narrative of the two sides of the story. Not negotiable, negotiable. He's going to negotiate. These aren't negotiating things. I mean, is it for revenue?
You have the billionaire backlash. That's new this week. You have this idea that maybe there'll be legal challenges to it. I think that there's a migration in sort of the center of opinion of how this might go out and how urgent the issue is. To me, I'm just watching the market and saying, you know, looks like the equity futures made a triple bottom overnight. Use that as your downside kind of mental floor for the moment. It's like 48.50-ish. But I mean, it's so tenuous. And when the market's moving like this, I always say it has to just go really far to find anybody with conviction. And that's why you get, you know, this type of twitchy action.
Pasquarello, Goldman Sachs, the fundamental backdrop has undeniably worsened, he says. Remember, he's the one a week ago was like preservation of capital, people. That's what this is about, that the game has changed. He follows it up with this most recent note. While the primary trend is now lower, I also think you have to be aware of the increased probability of indiscriminate short cycle rips. It's a feature, not an oddity, of when you have the S&P do this sort of thing. I expect the S&P will cut a broad pattern of gap down, gap up over the next few weeks. And the final point he reiterates, his view, preservation of capital, still the principal objective. My trading instinct, and it's nothing more than that, he says, is that next week brings some form of a de-escalation. You know, you've had the headline that the market moved on. We're looking, Brian, for any signs of light, as many people I talked to yesterday, late into the night, were thinking that there's got to be some sort of pivot coming at some point, because this is untenable, that they don't understand the damage that they are causing. If $11 trillion wiped out of stocks in a very short period of time doesn't ring the alarm bells, then something ultimately is going to do that. I'm frankly struck by the fact that you suggest today that you are staying the course that you have 6,700 for the year on the S&P. I have countless targets taken down, more again today, 5,600, 5,200, 5,950 from various strategists respectively there. Why are you staying the course?
Well, first of all, we're excessively fortunate to be here today. We've had this opportunity over our career to be on this network during days like this, and I can't be more humble for that, number one. Number two, Joe used the term treacherous. I would say unfortunate. It's very unfortunate what's happening here because I don't think it is anything with respect to fundamentals. And as you know, we're a fundamental investor. I can't speak to other people's process or discipline, Scott, in terms of how they look at targets. I know that how we do. And my team and I spent the weekend writing 2 reports, one for the U.S. and one for Canada, as is our duties as the chief strategist at Piper. I'm sorry, Piper, at BMO. At the end of the day, it is excessively rare to have this type of activity 2 days in a row. It's not rare to see a Friday type of sell-off into the weekend and have the exacerbated bottom that Mike is talking about on a Monday. In fact, on Monday, March 20th, you and I were on the Markets and Turmoil show after the market closed on COVID.
Bien, ya estoy de nuevo en esta transmisión de cobertura especial de las caídas en los mercados financieros. Vamos a ver qué noticias hay. De nuevo, acá dice de última hora que del 20% más 34% más 50%, los aranceles de Estados Unidos sobre China alcanzarían el 104% si se llegan a subir. Como pueden observar en esta publicación, a China se le ha implementado aranceles del 20, 34 y posiblemente el próximo miércoles el 50%. Lo que esto significa que China podría tener aranceles del 104%. Como pueden observar en esta última información, de hecho, China tendrá los aranceles más altos del mundo. Más altos del mundo.
Which they will in a recession, and that the multiple will have to come down, which it will, then that is purely based on fundamental trading.
La advertencia de Donald Trump, si China no retira su aumento del 34% sobre sus abusos comerciales ya prolongados antes de mañana, 8 de abril de 2025, Estados Unidos le impondrá aranceles adicionales del 50% a partir del 9 de abril. Esa es la advertencia de Donald Trump a China. Por lo cual esto muestra una guerra comercial. Será la declaración de una guerra comercial abierta. Vamos a ver cómo va a reaccionar China. Si China va a ceder o le subirá aranceles a Estados Unidos. Esa es la gran pregunta. Esa es la gran pregunta. Y ya prácticamente esto se está hablando de un lunes negro. Un lunes negro que, como pueden observar, ya hay muchos expertos en economía que están hablando de lo que está sucediendo con la economía mundial.
Do you believe that how Netflix and the way that they run their business has changed? No, the answer is no. Now,
y ya alertan de una posible recesión, una recesión económica.
We know that, and that is going to change, and we will change our numbers accordingly when we see those real numbers, Scott. So I think from a longer-term perspective, we are investors. We're not going to react to today or last week or what Trump's going to say in 30 seconds. We don't know that.
Y el foco de tensión es con China ahora. Ya le va a subir aranceles del 50% y son aranceles adicionales. Vamos a ver si esta medida es para hacer ceder a China o esto va a generar una recesión económica mundial.
By a president of the United States to send the market down by $11 trillion worth of value ever.
And that's why I said unfortunate. As an investor and as we talk, and we have to answer to our clients, Scott, because we, unlike other people, we actually run real live money. And it's been a really humbling time. This is not time for pride. Pride brings disgrace and humility generates wisdom.
De hecho, Donald Trump ya es tendencia. Ya es tendencia Donald Trump.
Your tone, I mean, the strength of your voice sounds like there's humility in it, but your narrative doesn't sound humble at all. It sounds like refusing to see the facts in front of you.
No, we don't know exactly what the facts are, quite frankly.
Do you think that the earnings numbers at the high are realistic?
No,
Are you staying with what are you at? The $290, $300?
No, I'm at 275.
And what multiple you put on 275?
Well, 270. Well, again, markets don't run off multiples versus earnings. Okay, that's not the way that it.
Así están los otros mercados. Este es el industrial Dow Jones. El S&P 500 es este.
Normalcy is it's a high teen to low 20s multiple.
El
That's where
Nasdaq
we are from a longer term perspective.
También.
That's not a recession multiple.
El Russell 2000.
Who says we're going to a recession?
That's not a slowdown. That's not even.
A excepción del VIX, que se anda bastante normal. El VIX es el único que se salva. No sé, este índice de VIX, ¿qué es?
That makes sense.
I think 20 times earnings, given the fact of the consistency of the earnings backdrop, the United States longer term, yes, it makes sense, especially considering where I actually do think that money's going to come back to
Pero el resto de mercados sí.
And so let's get
Sí
through
que
this
están
unfortunate behavior and move on from
rojos.
it. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry if you don't think I'm humble, because I'm actually quite humble, Scott. And you would know this if you'd actually sit with our clients and talk to us about how we've been in terms of longer term. And we have a track record that we're going to sit with in terms of calling markets and making people money, and we stand behind that.
Here's where I am. There are so many indicators right now that if you follow them,
Y aquí los principales medios de comunicación ya informan de lo que está sucediendo con los mercados financieros.
You know, how many stocks, what percentage of the S&P 500 on Friday traded 2 standard deviations, put call ratios, it's a long list. I consider that technicals. The technicals in that regard actually support being in equities now and looking forward.
Esto ya es una guerra arancelaria bastante
the fundamentals, and I'm sorry, Brian, we may be
importante.
talking different words here, but I'm going to use my definition. The fundamentals here are just so uncertain. Like, we don't know, and Scott, I think you were saying this, we just don't know what's next coming out of the president's mouth, or if we can believe it. The problem
Acá
with
dice
that
que la
is that
Casa
the
Blanca
stock
confirma
market
que los
in that
aranceles
level
de
of
Trump
uncertainty
a
about the
China llegarán al
fundamentals is going to
104%
absolutely go to
con
the
nueva
most worst-case
tasa
outcome that it possibly can.
amenazada
I think that's what's being
del
priced in right now,
50%,
is the
obviamente.
worst-case scenario. Now, some may say, and Mike, you may have alluded to this, that maybe we're not fully priced into a recession. Okay, the way I square
There's
this
not a maybe. We're not.
Okay, where I square this tension that I have, Scott, between the historical patterns and the fundamentals, is that we can go down in the short term, but I do believe those historical patterns
con lo que dice en esta información,
12 months from now all point higher. And I want to say one more thing
que
about
tal
this,
vez
because
en
many
esto
people push
haré
back
un
on this.
video,
They've said, this is different. This feels
un video
different.
aparte
You said
sobre
a second ago,
esto,
we've never had a president who seems
sobre el
so
tema de
willing to break
Taiwán,
things the way this
que ya están
president is.
creciendo los
All I can say
rumores
to that is with a lot of history, a
de
lot less
que
hair and
China
more
se
of
está
it being
preparando
gray.
para invadir Taiwán en los próximos meses.
Shifting events, and it always feels different. It
Luego,
always has
eso
its
es haciendo
own
un
unique,
paréntesis.
unbelievable flavor.
Según en nuestra información, el ejército de Taiwán ha iniciado un ejercicio de meses sin precedentes de 14 días que simula su peor escenario. Que el Ejército Popular de Liberación convierta un ejercicio en un asalto a gran escala contra la isla. Y acá lo que dice: el juego de guerra asistido por computadora, que será observado por personal militar estadounidense, se desarrollará hasta el 18 de abril y se produce en medio de temores de que una de las operaciones militares cada vez más frecuentes a gran escala de Beijing alrededor de Taiwán pueda de repente escalar a un ataque real. Entonces, ya surgen rumores de que China se prepara para invadir Taiwán en este año. Eso lo hablaré en un video aparte.
The other thing is there are false alarms, right? It's not as if it's this all-seeing, forward-looking indicator of where things absolutely will go.
Continúen en esta transmisión con la volatilidad, la caída de los mercados financieros. Acá dice que el primer ministro de Canadá, Mark Carney, dice que los aranceles de Trump están destrozando la economía global. Vamos a ver hasta qué punto va a llegar estas tensiones. Bien, hasta el momento no hay más información.
You've seen these times. It's only a handful of times you went down 10% in the S&P in 2 days, right? November of 2009.
Sí, acá dice, noticia última hora, la Casa Blanca confirma que los aranceles de Trump de China a China podrían alcanzar un enorme 104% con la nueva tasa de amenazada.
We have some commentary right now from Larry Fink, who obviously runs BlackRock. He is speaking right now at the Economic Club of New York. Leslie Picker has the latest for us.
Y esta es la noticia más reciente.
There's a lot of history in the building of the
Esta es la noticia más reciente.
How would you characterize this moment in American
Y aquí
history?
muestra una tabla,
Pretty sanguine. He said it's no different than anything else. We're fine.
una tabla que muestra la caída de los mercados a nivel mundial, como pueden observar. Y esto se produjo desde el día de ayer, en la noche, en los mercados de Asia, donde todas las operaciones bancarias en la bolsa francesa se han detenido tras la caída de los mercados del 6,5%. El índice de la bolsa de Moscú cayó por debajo de los 2.700 puntos por primera vez desde el 25 de diciembre de 2024. Las criptomonedas se están desplomando. La moneda de Trump ha perdido exactamente el 90% de su valor máximo. El precio del petróleo ruso cayó 25%. Y así está la tabla, como los mercados quedaron en rojo el día de ayer. Esto pasó el día de ayer, los mercados asiáticos y europeos. Prácticamente esto fue como el preludio del lunes negro que está sucediendo en estos momentos. Y bueno, por el momento esta es la información.
Well, thank you for that. Maybe it's the Irish Polish blood that got a little
Luego se hablará de las tensiones conflictivas. Acá muestra los países que fueron afectados en la economía por los aranceles de Trump. La volatilidad. La bolsa de Hong Kong cayó un 13%, Taiwán cayó un 9%, Japón un 9%, Italia un 8%, Singapur 8%, China 7%, Alemania 6%, Australia 6%, Francia 6%, Reino Unido 5%, India 4%, Rusia 3%, Arabia Saudí 3% y Turquía 2.0%. 2%. Entonces fue un lunes negro bastante importante en los mercados. Y esto continúa. Esto continúa con la caída del día de hoy, del lunes negro. Continúen con la información, sigan con esta transmisión en vivo.
No, I don't think
Volveré si hay noticias relevantes de último momento.
Following the great financial crisis that we went through, and following the tech wreck that we went through, and following what happened in the 90s, early 90s. So do I think that we're going to have some sort of a magic bullet that comes in and changes all this? No, I don't. I think the magic bullet is, let's stop with the unfortunate commentary. Let's get back to how markets are supposed to be consistently delivering in terms of price performance and how they act. Let's get through this malaise. And once we get through this malaise, let's take a look at forecasts longer term, at least for the end of the year. But we do believe 12 months out, the market will be up more than 20%.
All right. Steve Leisman, our senior economics correspondent, is with us too. I really want to focus on this credit issue because, you know, stock drops are hard to look at on the screen and on your statement. Deterioration of credit is a much more serious issue in the bigger picture. How are you thinking about that, and how are those within the Fed orbit, do you think, considering all of this?
Well, it's the thing you want to watch that would turn a stock downturn into something more meaningful. I'm watching it. I know other people out there are watching it. It's hard to imagine you have this kind of movement in stocks without there being some dislocation, and that's a nice euphemism that works for a little while until it no longer works. You can be sure the Fed is watching the credit situation. You can be sure they're watching out for dislocations. I haven't heard anything right now that makes me nervous or that potentially makes them nervous right now. It was interesting to listen to Bessent on Sunday on the Meet the Press. His first answer was talking about the idea that this sell-off had happened smoothly. And that's not important for the broader public, but it's important for people like us who watch the market very closely, that so far it had been smooth, but you got to be on the watch out for it. The Federal Reserve has a bunch of existing liquidity vehicles that are available both to banks. It has swap lines with foreign central banks that could be used if there was a dollar crunch overseas. What the Fed would want to do, Scott, in this situation is to not have to address any of this dislocation or any credit issues with monetary policy. It wants its liquidity vehicles to be used to solve those problems. And just one other thing, which is that I would argue to Brian, I don't like to argue with Brian, but it's different this time, at least right now, in that the Fed is a little hampered in coming in. It isn't like the market goes down and yada, 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 it comes back 20%. It comes back 20% because governments or central banks and companies take actions to make it come back 20%. And those actions could include help from the federal government, which I think Scott was just saying, I don't think we're going to get that this time. Help from the Federal Reserve, which is going to be very difficult given that there's an inflation impulse coming through. So companies are going to have to right size, and that means a decline in investment and a decline in unemployment, or in employment, if this lasts for a while. So yes, it may be that the market is up 20% a year from now, but there's a lot of changes that would happen in the economy for that to happen.
Yeah, Steve, thanks for teeing that up for us. That's Steve Leisman, senior economics correspondent. You want to address that, Brian?
No, well, I don't want to ever argue with Steve Leisman. I mean, that guy's amazing. No, I think that our research and our call for up 20% or up 29% from current levels or from overnight levels have nothing to do with the Fed cutting rates. They have nothing to do with monetary policy. It has everything to do with markets normalizing and unskewing all of the silliness that's gone on.
From all the money being put into the system now being taken out?
So this is part of our longer-term call, Scott. Actually, I was hopeful and prayerful we wouldn't get to this in terms of how bad it's gotten, but I believe that this has been a shock to the system. This is number 2 shock to the system to normalization. First thing was DeepSeek. Don't chase stocks because they're just going up. That the momentum trade completely in a way. Now this tariff stuff, I think we're being shocked into more normalized performance, and I think we're going to see more of a tighter range in fixed income. We're going to see a normalization of multiple, Scott. 15 to 20 on the high end, and then double-digit earnings growth for the next 5 years. And if we need to have a negative year, if we need to have this type of thing draw out for the next few quarters, fine. But I think longer term, I think this is where we're going for the next 3 to 5 years, more normalized. What's going on right now is not normal, and it has not been normal for a while.
Where's the emergence of leadership come from?
I think, you may remember that we think you don't have to have 1 or 2 stocks or 1 or 2 sectors lead. I think a lot of things are going to work together. I think we're back into the 90s where a lot of different strategies, asset classes work. And I know that you don't like small cap, and everybody likes to complain about small cap, but I think the reemergence of
small caps are down 20% year to date.
Yep. Because guess why? Because there's been no follow through on there, and people are chasing performance, and they've been selling them because they've been underperforming. So that's going to continue.
You don't think they deserve to be down 20%?
I don't think all of them need to. I think when I look at small caps, I look at stocks. I don't look at the overall index. And the Russell, by the way, is not I don't think the best index with respect to looking at small caps. So I think there's going to be pockets of a lot of different areas that work longer term.
Let's get back to Leslie Picker with more from Larry Fink. Les?
Hey, Scott. Yeah, he's talking about the economy and said one thing I would say for certain is the economy is weakening as we speak. He is urging the administration to focus on more of the pro-growth agendas, which he campaigned on, things like tax cuts and deregulation. And then Eric Schatzker, who's the moderator there from Bloomberg, he followed up saying, are we in a recession? Are we headed for a recession? And Fink said that most of the CEOs he talked to say that we are probably in a recession right now. So we're going to continue listening, but wanted to bring you those headlines as they happen, Scott.
Okay, Leslie, thanks so much. I mean, this is what I'm alluding to, right? Larry Fink, we're probably in a recession right now, which is why I find it difficult to make the argument that, the target should be where you have it, that earnings are going to be just fine, that there's no reason right now to have any expectation other than where earnings are supposed to be, and then the multiples justified at the higher end, which you said, high teens 20. That's you said that, not me.
Yep.
I want to know how you can justify that for our viewers, given what seems to be, for lack of a better description, quite obvious to most people but you.
Okay, and I'll go back to what I said. We wrote the reports over the weekend. We said that historically, when you've had these types of days, it's very rare. And it's not just because the Fed punched a bunch of liquidity since 1950, 12 months out from days like this and corrections like this. It doesn't matter if it's a correction or it doesn't matter if it's a bear market. The market's up on average 29.2% 12 months following. Now, with respect to changing our target, I can't announce on international television that we're going to change our target. I have to publish a report. I have to look at the research. I have to do all of this.
I don't expect you to change your target
I'm not going to react to everybody else changing their target, because that's not how we roll. Now, as I said, I will react when I know all the numbers. When I know the numbers are firm and we have confidence in the numbers in terms of growth. So then we will.
So when we have a recession, you're going to take your numbers down?
No, because the market's going to be up a tremendous amount before we have the recession. If the recession's happening right now, so then you have a recession right now and then two consecutive quarters of GDP negative, by that time we're going to be well into the Fed's probably going to have to cut. If we have a recession, the market's going to be rallying, Scott. So we could be up from these levels. That's just the way that it works. So I'm not going to react to recession and macro stuff. Once we see the numbers and feel better about where the bottoms up numbers, we will change our targets.
I mean, look, yeah, sure. Markets typically, if you go back to the old cycles, they bottom like halfway through a recession or something like that. I just feel like we're sort of several days into the reckoning with what this is going to be, and it's just the bands of probabilities around every outcome is so wide that I'm not saying you can't have it happen. And again, if you do a policy U-turn, maybe you haven't done much except cost a lot of credibility on Wall Street and among CEOs with the way that policy is being created.
Even if you have a pivot, what is the pivot going to be?
I think the issue here is,
what's it going to be?
Yes, and you talk about credit, we talk about like the plumbing of the system. To me, if you're rooting for the Fed to get involved, you're kind of rooting for an accident, and you don't want to do that because the stock market's not going to hang in there for that, because it's going to take a while for the data to pile up for them to act if it's just about the fundamental economic numbers.
I think the first step is the violence of the last several days has to abate. And everyone clearly expected that it was going to be a clearing event. We heard that. And everyone was positioned for the quote-unquote clearing event. You've had this violent deleveraging process. I do think there are things within the market today where you could take heart in. You could look at NVIDIA, which is higher. You look at Amazon. Some of the Mag 7 today look like they want to find some stabilization. That's a good thing. It's not indicative of this is the all clear. I think it's a process more than anything else that we have to go through. And that's really what a bottom is, a process.
Jimmy, you bought Citi today. Right? Is that
I did. I nibbled back at Citi. Just a little bit of history on this. You remember, I trimmed this about 2 months ago at 84. Where is it right now? 58. I mean, I'm okay buying it back here. I trimmed it. I didn't add the full position back. And by the way, reminder, I sold on United Healthcare on Friday. It gave me some cash. I didn't put all that to work. Why the nibble at all, though, in light of what we're talking about, is because of my belief, and this is synthesizing everything we're talking about here. Every piece of data that I'm coming in, just about every piece is negative. Like, I'm not talking about the technicals, the historical patterns. I'm talking the fundamental analysis. Every piece is negative. And to me, it strikes me that the conglomeration, the aggregate of that sentiment is just simply too negative. Let me be clear. The odds of a recession, in my opinion, have picked up meaningfully. But what I'm hearing from a lot of people, I'm not looking at you, Mike. Sure. Just a lot of people is a seeming 100% probability. I'm a little struck by what Larry Fink said. I'm a little struck by it. We may be on the cusp of a recession. We may be headed into a recession. The odds have gone up. But to say that we're in a recession now, I am looking for the massive number of layoff announcements. I'm not seeing them. I think they are going to come if we continue on this path. But I'm not seeing it right now. And the reason I bring this up is because this is a moment where the polemics, the headlines can be damaging. And I'm sorry I'm going to do this. You know, Jamie Dimon is somebody who commands my absolute respect. But it's been 3 years since the hurricane comment. It's been 3 years. If this is the final reckoning of the hurricane, I feel like some of the people in positions of power are being just a little bit careless in what they're saying.
Earnings season on Friday, and ultimately that's going to tell us where the market's going to go through the course of 2025. Are you going to get the 11% earnings growth that the street is now modeling for? I think we're going to learn a lot about that, and it largely depends on the direction of the economy.
I don't even know how much you're going to learn, to be quite honest, from this particular earnings season, other than the commentary is going to be awful. But we already know that. The numbers may not reflect the current environment, just like the jobs report this past Friday. Please, jobs are a lagging indicator. A lot of that's before all of this tariff mess has ripped through.
Subsequent to that, Scott, you will lose immediately the buyback intentions. You will lose a lot of the capex that was previously planned if there is that overwhelming universal negativity.
You know, you look at other calls in this market. We talked some about mega cap, obviously, and you noticed some of the nibbling in these names. That, you know, there was a moment today where the Nasdaq was green. Citi was talking about semis today. Could see another 20% downside. Discretionary is under huge pressure. What do you think about discretionary names? Anything travel related has gotten destroyed. You think it's been overdone based on your view? Based on your view?
Yeah, so we've been trimming around and moving some things around discretionary-wise because we think from a discretionary sector perspective, I think positions are going to be more concentrated in names like Amazon, quite frankly. And so we've added there.
Where have you gotten out of then, discretionary-wise?
We took major profits in TJ Maxx and longer term in Marriott because we've seen volumes drop pretty dramatically. And we sold Target a long time ago, but Target's in Staples. But at the end of the day, macro data on consumer discretionary, as Joe said, is lagging. So consumer sentiment typically bottoms a month after the sector bottoms. And so, again, this time may be different, but at the end of the day, we think a lot of these numbers are already in there, number one. Number two, in terms of the earnings side of things, from a modeling perspective in a process, if earnings do come down, and they are going to come down, and you see all analysts drop their numbers at once in terms of the current fiscal year, next fiscal year, that's called an earnings revision. When you see earnings revisions all drop at the same time, that typically and historically is a fantastic buying opportunity. So I think, again, not to be always Pollyanna or positive, but I think if you have analysts dropping all their numbers at once, I think that actually could signal a nice buying opportunity.
What would make you negative? What would make you negative?
I think if we see continued treacherous behavior here that's going to be longer than the next month or so, if we start to see earnings really decelerate dramatically more than we think it is, then we're going to have to change our tune. And then lastly, if we see some sort of uptick in inflation, that's also going to bother us, and we're going to have to batten down the hatches.
All right, you guys want to take a quick break? Is that what we want to do? Yeah. All right, we'll do that. Let's do that. We come back. We do have some new data on how retail is feeling through all this. We will share that with you. Kate Rooney following the money. She has this report coming up next.
There's some things that work better together, like your workplace benefits and retirement savings. Voya helps you choose the right amounts without over or under investing, so you can feel confident in your financial choices.
Voya, well planned, well invested, well protected.
Empower.
So handsome.
I think. Oh, I can't buy this. What's wrong?
Hang on there. Actually, you can. Your Empower investment account has performed well, and this whole off-whitish cantaloupe thingy is really working for you. So... Oh! Hot to trot! Nobody says that. Get good at money so you can be a little bad. Empower.
One way or another, I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna get you one way or another.
When the road's out to get you, Hyundai's got you.
The Investing Club annual meeting.
I intend to give you the single best day of stocks and thought imaginable.
Get your ticket now. Go to cnbc.com/Jim's meeting.
Every day, I'm reading extensively, I'm checking the markets throughout the trading session, working the phones, talking to sources, and doing my own reporting to share insights, information, and all of the details that you need to be able to make money.
Do you have a life insurance policy you no longer need? Now you can sell your policy, even a term policy, for an immediate cash payment. Call Coventry Direct to learn more.
We thought we had planned carefully for our retirement.
But we quickly realized we needed a way to supplement our income.
Our friends sold their policy to help pay their medical bills. And that got me thinking. Maybe selling our policy could help with our retirement.
I was skeptical, so I did some research and called Coventry Direct. They explained life insurance is a valuable asset that can be sold.
We learned we could sell all of our policy or keep part of it with no future payments. Who knew? We sold our policy. Now we can relax and enjoy our retirement as we had planned.
If you have $100,000 or more of life insurance, you may qualify to sell your policy. Don't cancel or let your policy lapse without finding out what it's worth. Visit CoventryDirect.com to find out if your policy qualifies, or call 1-800-514-7800. Coventry Direct, redefining insurance.
We will hit 50,000 on the Dow, and we're going to have a broad-based recovery in the S&P 500. The market's trying to find its bottom now. The thing I would say to retail investors is don't get panicked out by all of this.
Well, that was White House trade advisor Peter Navarro today on this very network. Good message after they've wiped out $11 trillion in value in the markets from the high, and new data shows retail investors have been trying to chase the sell-off. Our Kate Rooney is following that money, looking to take a little long-term Larry Fink-like advice, but not always easy. What do you know?
Yeah, Scott, so that is what we're seeing. Last week marked this record. It was the highest level of inflows from individual investors that we've seen in the past decade. It did slow slightly if you look at Friday. Vanda Research with this out. You can see on the chart there, inflows were still near those records, and Marco Iacchini over at Vanda tells me the investor moves really come down to muscle memory. Says 15 years of buying the dip has worked, and it is hard to shake that off. There is one defensive trade we've noticed popping up. So this inverse ETF for the tech-heavy Qs, it's called the SQQQ, climbed to the top of Vanda's most traded list by retail investors. First time that's happened in more than 2 years, and suggests some hedging going on. It had not been in the top 10 on that record-breaking Thursday. Also some steady buying of Vanguard's S&P index. So analysts say that could suggest dollar cost averaging some of the longer-term allocation by more conservative investors. Robinhood noting that more aggressive dip buying is also wearing off. Steve Quirk, the chief brokerage officer over there, told me there has been a migration to ETFs over some of the riskier single stocks out there. And the list of retail favorites, though, has been remarkably consistent across brokerage firms. It's not just Robinhood. You look at Fidelity, too. Number one is still NVIDIA. As of this morning, it had about a 72% buy ratio. You got Tesla, Palantir still in the top 10. And then Ford became a top bet on the automakers this week. Amazon still among the most traded names. It comes as investors are sitting on record piles of cash as well. There's about $7.4 trillion sitting in money market funds right now. Scott, back to you.
Okay, Kate, thank you for that. That's Kate Rooney. You think a lot about, what the retail psyche might be through all this. There was a point in time during the, beginning parts of this sell-off that one of the reasons why you didn't initially have a larger flush was because retail was holding strong.
Yes.
And if not buying on the dip. Now, that may be changing.
Yeah, tactically, I'm not sure that's what you want to see, which is really the highly active retail trader feeling as if we can just keep, kind of averaging down and buying the same names. You maybe want to see a little bit of a backing away there, even if the long term, it's a smart thing to do if you're just rebalancing into equities. I've also, even in high net worth, like you look at the numbers from Merrill Lynch, and that's a similar instinct. Now, retail investors in general are slow to book losses. And so they're probably, if they have cash, they are looking to buy. I don't see it as much as the sort of 15-year buy the dip. We used to talk about it in the 90s, Brian. Buy the dip was way back then, and everyone looked at the 87 crash. To me, it's more about post-COVID. There's this really highly active, the kind of meme adrenaline traders, as I call them. That to me is still there. And I'm not sure they have to go away, but maybe it doesn't help that they're just kind of
my concern with all of that, though, is that market structure has changed so dramatically over the last 5 years. I wonder if some of these retail traders, their expression of buying the dip is no longer in the individual security itself, but they're playing these zero-dated options, or they're doing it through a lot of options activity, which is creating even more violence in this treacherous environment.
One thing that just I feel about this is, look, the historical pattern is retail's going to get it wrong, and I that's why I hate this term, all right? That's why they're called dumb money. But 2021, and we just mentioned meme stocks. Hey, guess who won? All right, the so-called dumb money won. I don't think that's a historical pattern. I'm not saying you're doing that, Mike, but I don't think that's a historical pattern that we can really rely on, that retail's getting it wrong. They've gotten it right.
Well, the Vanda research shows that those accounts they track are underperforming. The active traders. I mean, if you just look at the retail flow, obviously the market's been.
To Mike's point, I think there's a difference. When we're using the word retail, there's a difference between those active traders in that 21 period and true retail.
I see your point, and I will be the first to admit that I started out the show talking about historical patterns that I believe in. I don't mean to be duplicitous by immediately saying here's a historical pattern that we should question. What I will say is that over the last 5 years, I have learned to question historical patterns, a lot of them, whether it's mainline economic dogma or what we're talking about now.
If I'm a plain vanilla retail investor, though, with long-term money, the thing that I'm watching today is the fact that bonds are not helping you.
No.
And so that's a little bit of a, let's not say it's a pattern that's going to continue, but 60-40 has not actually been a buffer.
It's helped you over the last several days, and everyone on the show knows I've been adding to the TLT position, but I watched it last night. I watched it this morning. This morning, I took off a little bit of the TLT. I'm still long TLT. I still think we've got lower yields ahead, but you have to look at those dynamics in the market, and when you see things that should be happening that are not happening, you have to be quick to react to that. You mentioned semis before. I just want to give this to the viewers. Watch the semis because they were first in. They were first in. They made their high last July. Software didn't make the high until December. The market didn't make the high, obviously, until February 19th of this year. Watch the semis. First in is usually first out after you have this violent deleveraging process.
Does my humbly defiant friend have something
Thank you.
to add before
I
we
actually
take a
do.
break?
Thank you so much. You know what's different this time? When I learned the business a long time ago from my very first mentor, Bill O'Neill, he used to say that institutional is a smart money, retail is a dumb money. I don't think it's that as simple anymore because retail has a bunch of different types of connotations. High private wealth has done an amazing job in terms of asset allocation since the tech wreck. And our private wealth advisors, first when we were at a place called Merrill Lynch, now at a wonderful place called BMO, have done a wonderful job positioning clients accordingly. During these massive drawdowns, they are positioned to add here, just like they were in 2020 and just like they are right now. So if you're doing your job as an advisor and you're cautioning your investors to be not fearful and focus on the longer term, now is when you should be adding.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's insulting to even use the words anymore to describe retail investors who are more armed with more information than they could ever get in the past when the markets have been democratized more so than they ever have.
That is true,
over history.
But everyone is riding the same curve, right? So if I have like a 90-factor model and I'm at one of these pods and it's trading automatically before the headline even gets to a human eye, yeah, we have more information than ever, but guess who has more? Who's paying the most for it and who has the most firepower?
That's a fair
I don't
point.
think it's dumb money. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's difference of time horizons. Retail does best when it arbitrages the professional time horizon. I don't have a monthly performance bogey I have to worry about. I'm talking about 20 years from now. I can make the market work to my advantage if I buy on weakness. That's different than saying that they're always going to get every move right up and down.
Okay. Pippa Stevens has the headlines for us. Hi, Pippa.
Hey, Scott. The Trump administration has asked the Supreme Court to block a court order to return a Maryland man back to the U.S. from a notorious prison in El Salvador. In an emergency appeal filed today, the DOJ argued the U.S. district judge overstepped her authority in ordering Kilmar Abrego Garcia's return just before midnight Tuesday. The administration had admitted that Garcia, a protected legal resident, was deported due to, quote, an administrative error. Ukraine plans to send a team to Washington this week to negotiate on a minerals deal. Kyiv's deputy prime minister said today the team aims to work on a more expansive draft of the deal offered by the U.S. as the Trump administration looks for repayment for military aid provided for Ukraine's fight against Russia. And it was a blockbuster weekend for the Minecraft movie, the Warner Brothers film based on the video game, taking the top spot at the box office with an estimated $157 million, according to ComScore. It's the first movie this year to top $100 million and is the biggest opening since Deadpool and Wolverine last summer. Halftime Report is back right after this.
Did you know taking Zysol at night relieves allergies while you sleep? So you wake refreshed for a more productive day. Get 24-hour continuous relief that does not fade. Be wise all, take Zysol at night.
You're busy. Deadlines are looming. You've got events to plan, people to impress, and a brand to elevate. With 4imprint, you get more than promo products. You get certainty. From trade shows to team milestones, 4imprint gives you personal service, design expertise, and unmatched quality. On time, every time, with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Be 4imprint certain. Visit 4imprint.com for promotional products that work as hard as you do. 4imprint, for certain.
At U.S. Bank, when we say we're in it with you, we mean it. Not just for the good stuff, the grand openings and the celebrations, but for all the hard work it took to get there. We are in for all of it. It's tough for sure, but less tough when you have the right people by your side, like Kayla from Kansas City and thousands of other bankers around the country. Because together we're proving there's nothing as powerful as the power of us.
If you're only maxing out a 401k, you could add a Robinhood IRA with a 3% contribution boost.
Roger that.
Robinhood Gold gives you a 3% match on your annual IRA contributions.
We just signed the lease on our 3rd shop. My assistant went to customink.com to get new uniforms with all the locations. He found great products, uploaded new art, and had boxes sent to all the shops. Custom Ink makes it so easy. Get started today at customink.com.
The next series of the world's first downside-protected Bitcoin ETFs with 100, 90, and 80% protection levels through our proven protection strategy. Count on us today for tomorrow.
June 5th, CNBC's Fast Money Live returns. Join Melissa Lee and the team of traders live and on air at the NASDAQ market site in New York City. Get your tickets now at cnbcevents.com/fastmoney.
All right, we will have earnings this week. Believe it or not, earnings season kicks off. Brian Belsky.
Yes.
Going to go with you. I wonder what you think about these large banks in the here and now. There's a lot going on. Recession fears, lack of capital markets activity, probably even less now as a result of all of this. What do I do?
Well, I think in the prior block we talked about wealth, and we really like those multi-divisional banks that have commercial bank, consumer bank, investment bank, and wealth. And that's why we're sticking with Bank of America. Our largest financial position across the board, Scott, is Berkshire. And we still like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and Goldman. Now, we do think that the medium-sized banks, we still think that those banks are going to suffer relative to the really big banks and the small banks. So we're going to stay with that. Are their earnings going to be down? I would guess that they're going to be defensive. I know that you said in the prior commentary that it's almost too late, but no, it's not. I think they're going to be very, very negative and very cautious, under promise and over deliver. We're going to be back into that game. So we're still overweight financials. We think this is going to be the great opportunity for the next 12 to 24 months in terms of earnings growth, dividend growth, balance sheet. And so those are the names that we really like.
So to kind of respond to what I asked you before about emerging leadership surrounding financials themselves, and I somewhat disagree with you that all boats can kind of rise. I think you have to find leadership when you're in this type of corrective environment from somewhere. How important to you is it that financials not really just survive the upcoming quarter, but actually have a degree of relative outperformance to the rest of the market? Because like you, my strategy is overweight financials. A lot of the momentum strategy is overweight financials. Financials have been, quote unquote, the story of the last 6 months.
Hey, by the way, BlackRock, Larry Fink continuing to speak. Let me just introduce this into the conversation because I brought up the lack of deals. He says he does expect more M&A. I think there are going to be more M&A opportunities as we deregulate. I mean, the big question I have is, in the United States, will SIFI banks, systemically important financial institution banks, be allowed to do acquisitions now? And my belief is going to be yes. If we have, are we going to see a flurry of new opportunities in banking? M&A? The answer is, I think, clearly yes. So just add that to whatever you were thinking about in your answer.
Yeah, so per your point, they've been under focus the last 6 months because, you had the Trump bump in the fourth quarter and everybody kind of chased the banks because they were massively underweight.
Rightfully so, though.
Rightfully so. It was the right trade. So now if you see rates going down and you see these balance sheets of Fortress America in terms of how strong they are, you see the dividend growth side of things, you see the value. But I do firmly believe the really, really big ones and the really small ones, by the way, are the best position. The small ones because of their relationship and their cleanliness of their balance sheet. The big ones because they're multi-divisional assets. The middle-sized banks, I think you're going to see surprising mergers of just below the money centers and some of the bigger regionals, because the only way that they're going to be able to compete going forward is to merge and try to take on the big banks.
What do you make of Fink? As part of the conversation about
trying to keep
all these things that haven't happened that people wanted to have happen and thought were going to happen, which is why they were positioned the way they were coming in. It's still like, hey, okay, it's still going to happen.
It's going to be hard to dislodge that general thrust of this idea that at least, incrementally we're going to move in that direction. I don't think that if we don't get M&A, it's because of regulation. If we don't get M&A, it's because people don't like where their stock's trading. There's a wide bid ask, and they don't have CEO confidence, which just plunged, which is one of the tightest correlations to M&A volume that you have out there. What I do think is interesting coming from the banks likely is probably the macro tell on the consumer, because you always have Moynihan and Diamond saying our internal networks tell us spending is holding up and the deposits, average deposits in the accounts are actually above pre-COVID. Let's see if that bears out as they give their guidance in the coming quarter.
By the way, JPM and Bank of America are green today.
And yet, take J.P. Morgan, the creme de la creme, off 25%. So these, the creme de la creme in the financial industry has been hammered here. But Mike, I think where you ended there is exactly the biggest point. We know that M&A is lousy right now. The IPO market, forget it. The reason that bank stocks generally sell off as hard as they do in a recessionary environment is because of concerns about credit quality, having to take up loan loss reserves, having to actually flow those reserves through your P&L. But, I'm struck by the fact that not just the banks themselves, but the Federal Reserve has said that, generally speaking, corporate and consumer balance sheets are in good shape. Doesn't feel anything like, 2007 with the levels of leverage that we had then.
Yeah. It sounds to me like you're going to be on the edge of your seat for Delta's earnings on Wednesday.
No. Look, in fact, let's just...
That's a big earnings report, though.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it's going to suck. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. How could he possibly come on and keep guidance? I can't see it. Now, I'm not selling the stock.
They already kind of gave you a heads up that it doesn't look pretty good, the outlook, right?
I mean, the last numbers that he put to it were to take down first quarter but keep the full year intact. I just don't see any way full year stays intact.
All right, let's do finals after this break.
Oh, dish soap is on sale. We need it?
Yeah. Oh, I think we need ketchup too.
What's in there?
Here. The ketchup's not in the fridge.
Ketchup does not go in the fridge.
Like when you were a kid coming up, you did this in your mother's house.
Right.
Baby, she failed you. I love your mother, but she ain't raised you right.
You try telling her that.
No, I will.
Wow.
Good wow or bad wow?
Just wow.
Trading at Schwab is now powered by Ameritrade, unlocking the power of Thinkorswim, the award-winning trading platforms. Bring your trades into focus on Thinkorswim Desktop with robust charting and analysis tools, including over 400 technical studies. Tailor the platforms to your unique needs with nearly endless customization. And track market trends with up-to-the-minute news and insights. Trade brilliantly with Schwab.
America has to be able to protect itself. We need to stop supporting the rest of the world and start supporting American workers.
Let me make this very clear. This is not a negotiation. This is not that. This is a national emergency.
Invest with an advantage with CNBC Pro.
CNBC Pro gives you access to exclusive market commentary, expert analysis to help you make smarter decisions in a time of volatility.
Go to cnbc.com/getCNBC Pro now.
If you don't like traditional foundation like me, I have a secret for you. It's called What the Foundation. What the Foundation is a hybrid product that blends foundation and moisturizer. This is exactly what I think a foundation should be. Learn more at jonesroadbeauty.com.
As a contractor, I find sometimes the most impactful thing you can say is what you do on your own home. A couple of years ago, we put a pool in our backyard, my wife and I. There was only one choice for the decking around the new pool. We used TimberTech because of the low maintenance on the product. You can install it and just enjoy it for its lifetime.
Epay, Redwood. I mean, after 1 year, you're sanding and refinishing if you want to keep that sharp look. If you don't want to sand and oil every year, you want low maintenance, go with TimberTech.
I'm Dr. Shannon Klingman, the inventor of whole body deodorant like Mando. It's clinically proven to block odor all day and controls odor for 72 hours. Mando's unique formula stops odor before it starts. That's my secret to better odor control everywhere.
All right, 3 o'clock Eastern today. Of course, Mike Santoli is going to join me for his last word and maybe more words given these markets. So thanks for being here for the hour. It's been a pleasure having you, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple hours. Adam Parker, Torsten Sloke, Ed Yardeni, Bruce Richards, Jack Manley, everybody is going to join me for that final stretch, and I cannot wait for that. Brian Belsky, I'll give you the first shot
Scott
at final trade. Sometimes it gets a little spicy.
You know, it's good.
Sometimes it gets a little spicy up here, especially when the markets are like this. People are certainly feeling unsettled.
Yep.
And No one clearly knows where all this is ultimately going to go.
No
what do you
one
got?
does. Thank you so much. First Citizens Bank shares.
Thank you. Farmer Jim.
Berkshire, I'll bet he's salivating right now.
Man, salivating. He's probably feeling good about where they are. Go ahead.
I mentioned semis before. KLA Corp, it's a name we've owned in the ETF since inception.
All right, I'll see you on the bell. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you, Scott, and welcome to the exchange. I am Brian Sullivan. Kelly is off today, and what a day it has been for the markets already and your money. I mean, we've kind of lived a week in just a couple of hours. All right, if you're just joining us, folks, here's what you missed. The stock market opened up the session sharply lower. We were down about 3 or 4% depending on the index. Then, around 10 a.m., there was some chatter of a possible pause on the tariffs. That sent stocks skyrocketing. In fact, not only did we recap the losses, but we actually went up 1% or 2%. Shortly after that, the White House, responding to our own Eamon Javers, who called the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, and she called that bad headline about a pause fake news. Eamon relayed that to the markets, and guess what? That sent stocks crashing back down again. So we were down big, then we were up, and now we're down again. A lot going on. Here's where things stand right now. We are off our lows. The S&P 500 down 0.9%. The NASDAQ, I'm going to go this way, down about 0.5%. The low for the Dow was 1,700 points. The S&P 500 was down more than 4% right after the open. We're only down about 0.9%. We're still down. We're still in the red. But considering the NASDAQ at one point was down over 5%, that doesn't look too bad. All right, there is a lot going on, so why don't we get to where things stand on the tariff front at this hour. We've got the aforementioned Eamon Javers at the White House with the very latest. He's got messaging from the White House, Megan Casella, with what is still to come on tariffs. Remember, those country-specific tariffs kick in on Wednesday, and now you've got the
Y así continúa la volatilidad de los mercados mundiales.
From a market perspective, Oppenheimer's John Stolfus is here. He just revised his year-end price target down. He had
Y aquí dice una noticia, el director ejecutivo de BlackRock, Larry Fink, probablemente estemos en recesión en este momento. Esto lo acaba de decir el director ejecutivo de BlackRock, como pueden ver en esta publicación, que probablemente en estos momentos estamos en una recesión. Supongo que ya deben conocer quién es BlackRock. Creo que BlackRock es ese banco bastante influyente y también controvertido. Sí, creo que BlackRock es un banco, creo, o es una agencia de inversión. Déjeme ver. Es una sociedad de inversión, no es un banco multinacional con sede en Nueva York. Sí, este es BlackRock. Y su director es Larry Fink. Supongo que Larry Fink, este hombre,
April 9th. Talked to some folks in the West Wing about this as well, and they say that the president is serious about this. This is really going to happen. One of the questions that I have about this, Brian, and we don't have an answer to right now, is what is the president's
muchas teorías hablan de que BlackRock son los dueños del mundo. El poderoso fondo de inversión que busca controlar los puertos clave del Canal de Panamá, de hecho, tiene bastante influencia este fondo de inversión poderoso, BlackRock, que ya hablan de que Probablemente estamos en una recesión en este momento. Entonces, así está la economía volátil en estos momentos. Acá lo último, que Wall Street ya tiene fuertes caídas. Vamos también en estos momentos. Picos, solo un poco de picos ha tenido, pero sigue en caída en números rojos. Solo a comienzos de la apertura, a las 10 de la mañana, tuvo un repunte por el rumor de que Trump se iba a suspender los aranceles por 90 días, y eso creó un poco de confianza en los mercados y por eso se puso en verde. Sin embargo, cuando la Casa Blanca desmintió que era falso ese rumor del aplazamiento de los aranceles, pues volvió a desplomarse y quedar en números rojos. Y así hasta el momento ha quedado los mercados financieros. Que parece indicar que va a cerrar en números rojos. Va a cerrar en números rojos. Y ya ha vuelto a caer, ya va por los 1000 puntos, como pueden observar. Esto es en los mercados en vivo e indirecto. Ya los mercados ya perdió más de 900 puntos y ya va por los 1000 puntos. Entonces, y con la incertidumbre de los aranceles a China, esto va a crecer más la volatilidad. Esto va a crecer más la volatilidad. Mientras tanto, el presidente Trump está en la oficina oval. Creo que va a recibir más adelante al primer ministro de Israel, supongo para discutir sobre qué van a hacer con Irán. Acá dice que según acá dice, no sé si sea un medio confiable, que Trump y con el primer ministro de Israel van a discutir ya un ataque coordinado a Irán. No lo sabemos por el momento. Y así en este gráfico muestra la caída de los mercados, cómo se produjeron con el lunes negro. Acá en esta publicación habla de que se han producido las peores caídas del mercado desde 1929. Desde 1929, ¿y sabe lo que se produjo en 1929? Pues la Gran Depresión. La Gran Depresión. De hecho, esto se compara con la pandemia del 2020, la crisis financiera del 2008, la burbuja.com del año 2000, el lunes negro de 1987 y el colapso de Wall Street de 1929, el preludio de la Gran Depresión. Acá muestran las comparativas. Entonces, vamos a ver cómo se van desarrollando esta volatilidad en los mercados.
There's some of the target price declines. Bank of America, Oppenheimer, JP Morgan, UBS, Goldman, Wells Fargo, Evercore, and more taking their prior estimates down to anywhere between 5,200 for JP Morgan Chase and 6,000 for Wells Fargo. Your next guest is on that list. And he previously had the highest target out there at 7,100. That number, though, revised down to 5,950 this morning. Let's bring in Oppenheimer Chief Investment Strategist John Stolfus. John, welcome. It's been a chaotic day, and I do want to, I know it's stressful and it's scary for a lot of people, but I want to point
Y creo que los mercados cerrarán. Creo que hasta las 4 de la tarde cerrarán los mercados. Vamos a ver cómo se produce más información. Por el momento está la noticia más relevante de que el grupo de inversión BlackRock, el director ejecutivo de BlackRock, Larry Fink, habla de que probablemente estemos en una recesión en este momento. Y lo dice él. Este grupo de inversión influyente y poderoso. ¿Será que esto es el preludio de que se avecina una recesión económica mundial? Vamos a ver cómo se desarrollan los acontecimientos y continúen con la transmisión en vivo.
Whether that comes from the other side being affected by tariffs, our side or both sides, the likelihood of going forward with this to disastrous results is just too awful to expect. It's against the global economy, many different countries around the world. We do think, we're not part of the of President Trump's cabinet or anything, and this is not a political statement. We do think that probably what he's looking at is he's thinking, the U.S. is the biggest customer of the rest of the world, which is dedicated to exporting over the last 40, 30, 20, 10 years, more intensified, usually with an address on the box to the U.S. for the best customers, because we spend more than anybody else. So the thought is, if your best customer is upset, make a deal with the best customer. The question is, a lot of egos get affected. There's a lot of constituencies in the world that are upset about this, and they want to see their leaders essentially push back on it.
I guess, John, and we don't know what's going to happen with tariffs. Everybody's kind of doing the same thing you're doing, which is this a tactic? If so, what's the end game? What's the goal? Vietnam apparently said we'll do zero. Navarro saying this morning on CNBC that's not enough. I guess the fear that your clients probably have, and I'm sure your phone and emails and texts are just blowing up right now, is what if it just gets worse? Like, we keep waiting for this market bottom, this market turn. Everybody's brought down their estimates. There's nothing stopping you or anybody else from bringing down your estimates and your target prices again.
Nothing's stopping us from doing it, and if we thought it was the right thing to do, we would. But basically, as you know, I've been in this business for 42 years, and this isn't my first rodeo. I mean, the first thing I went through was October 19th of 1987. The Dow dropped 23% in one day, and everybody thought it was the end of the world, and it wasn't. The very next day, institutions came back shortly thereafter.
Markets actually ended 87 higher. A lot of people don't remember that the worst day in the stock market history, and the year was actually up for the Dow.
We go. And so that's one of the reasons why you see the strategists as a group that you've shown, generally with expectations that something will get settled here. The egos will have to be packed in the box. We've gone from Trump, 1.0 to Trump 2.0, but essentially we've gone from tariffs 101 in the first administration process to the second administration process for Trump. It's tariffs 401. It's like senior year. So this is highly disruptive. The markets are seeking direction here. Volatility within the day, not uncommon. This is that falling knife kind of period where you really, for most investors, you're not looking to catch the bottom here, but you want to grab it before it takes off when we get out of this. But right now you're building shopping lists, and some of the best sectors in the world have been just beaten up extraordinarily, and some of the best stocks in the world have been beaten up unnecessarily on the drama.
And I want to, we've got the market boards going up, and if you're on the radio, I'll say it. There is some green on the screen. The NASDAQ as a whole is down, but many of the Mag 7 are higher. Guys, can we bring that back up? You got Meta that's higher right now. You have NVIDIA that is higher right now. You had a few of the other big names, thank you, Amazon and Alphabet/Google. Microsoft is still down. But the stocks, John, the stocks that led us for 2 years, all we talked about was the Magnificent Seven and AI and the capital spending plans. That drove the market to almost 30 times earnings on the S&P 500. In the last week, we've stopped talking about, not CNBC, but the markets are focused on tariffs, not on this. Does it give you any comfort, solace, whatever word you want to use, that some of the Mag 7 right now are higher?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality is technology is deeply embedded in the lives, as you know, and we've spoken many times before, of both business and the consumer, not only in the U.S., but everywhere around the world, developed emerging markets. I just got back from a short period in Mexico. It was supposed to be a vacation that got interrupted by all of this. But the emerging market, they got the bicycles with the smartphones, just like in New York City. And so where we are today is the tech looks like it's been brutally beaten up. Communication services, which is the streamers, which is the search engines, and which is the social media, brutally beaten up. Consumer discretionary, you think people are never going to shop again. That's been beaten up. Industrials, which is the next window here for when we start building, not a massive amount of factories, but massive factories in certain areas that's important to national security and national security. And then the banks, which will likely do well, but you want to be diversified across all 11 sectors. But our favorites are those that got beaten up worst, because we found over the years, past performance no guarantee of future results. But generally speaking, quality that's beaten up gets reappraised and recovers very nicely.
Yeah, it is. And John, you know, we appreciate the views. We appreciate the honesty. It is a humbling time. And I will end it on a positive note for our next guest. And this is not getting a lot of attention. The S&P 500 is still up 92% in 5 years. So unless you started investing about 5 months ago, you should still be higher depending on what you may or may not have bought and if you had a diversified portfolio. John Stolfus, Oppenheimer, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, so your next guest says that we could be nearing capitulation. He is keeping an eye on the S&P 500's 200-week moving average as the volatility continues today. Let's bring in BTIG's Jonathan Krinsky for more. Jonathan, markets, you just heard me mention, some of the NASDAQ big names, the ones that kind of matter, they are higher. We saw VIX that hit 60 briefly, massive volume at the open. Do you think we're at capitulation?
Hey, Brian. So, you know, when you look at all the major bottoms over the last 40 years or so, we're seeing signs that are consistent with a lot of those bottoms. Now, when you get into this type of volatility, you know, and as you've seen today with a 9% intraday range on the S&P futures as of now, you know, calling the exact bottom is very difficult. But we think we are in the ballpark. And you mentioned that 200-week moving average, which, you know, we don't talk about that a lot because, quite frankly, you don't get near it very often. But in times of extreme market duress, it tends to be a good market barometer for a trading low outside of recessionary bear markets, deep recessionary bear markets. So if we look at the last 40 years, the only 2 times when the 200-week moving average has been violated for a meaningful amount of time was the 2002 bear market and the great financial crisis in 08-09. Even the crash of 87, the EU crisis in 2011, they all stopped at the 200-week moving average. And that comes in around 46.75. We got within about 3% of that overnight in the futures. So, yeah, we think we're in the ballpark here.
Yeah, and I don't want to be the Grim Reaper up here, okay? I've been doing this 30 years as well, and ultimately all crashes, while painful, turned out to be longer-term buying opportunities. But they could be very long because if you go down 20%, you got to go up 27% or whatever the number is to get back to where you were. It's just the law of math. Does the speed of the decline, though, Jonathan, does that matter in your analysis? And here's why I ask. In 2022, 3 years ago, the markets fell 25% top to bottom, but they did it slowly. January to October was like a slow bleed. It was a terrible year overall. This is losing 20% in a matter of days, does that speed and violence go into your thinking and your analysis?
Yeah, so there often is symmetry in declines and rebounds. Again, think about the crash of '87. It was severe and swift, but you rebounded quite quickly. The COVID crash, similarly, extreme downside move, and then you V-shaped back to the highs. And conversely, like you said, 2022, you think about some of the more long, dragged-out bear markets, they can take longer to recover. So in some ways, the extreme downside velocity does lend itself to a potential V-shaped recovery. We're not calling for that yet, but I think that's certainly in the cards. And you do tend to see that symmetry often in markets.
Jonathan, can you stay there? I know we're going to come back to you, so don't go anywhere. We have some breaking news right now out of the White House with Eamon Javers. Eamon.
Brian, an interesting wrinkle in the schedule here at the White House. We were expecting a full-dress press conference later this afternoon in the East Room between Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump here after their meeting, which is about to happen any moment now. What we're now told by the White House is that they're canceling the full-dress portion of that press conference, so they're not going to have folks in the East Room to ask the president and the Israeli leader questions. Instead, we're going to see an Oval Office pool spray in which a select group of reporters is brought into the Oval Office. I'm told that the president will take questions during that pool spray, but they're saying that for scheduling and logistical reasons here at the White House, they've canceled the full-dress sit-down press conference piece of this meeting between Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump that was scheduled for this afternoon. So not an enormous change, Brian, but when we're looking for any wrinkle of anything that's happening at this White House, I thought it was at least worth flagging for you that there's a pretty significant scheduling change.
For the non-news media pros out there, Eamon, what would be then the difference between the full-dress press conference and what we in the industry call a pool spray? Explain that sort of in layman's terms.
Sure. So what we were going to see, according to the schedule, was the president and Netanyahu in the Oval Office, sitting down in those chairs in front of the fireplace, shaking hands, presumably taking some questions from the press, and then separately over in the East Room later on in the day, not much later on in the day, they would take questions from a room full of reporters and do what they call a 2-and-2, which is in which case each leader takes 2 questions from the news media. So a more elaborate, full press conference with reporters standing in the East Room, that sort of thing. That has now been canceled. So we'll see the president once on camera in the Oval Office answering a few questions from a small group of reporters there, but we won't see the president and the Israeli leader taking a full suite of questions from reporters in the East Room. And they're saying that's because of logistics and scheduling of how the day was going today.
So I don't know who those reporters are, Eamon, and I hope that we're going to call you Layman with Eamon from now on, by the way. I hope that Eamon Javers is in that room because we need a market representative in that room. What are the odds we get a question on sort of this bad headline that we got? We want to hear from the president directly about whether or not he would have would he put the ego in check and do some kind of a pause?
Yeah. Well, a couple of thoughts on that, Brian. One is there are a lot of good reporters here at the White House. I'm sure somebody will ask that question. We'll see. 2 is I'm going to go try to put my foot in the Oval Office door and see if I can get in there and ask the question myself. Sometimes that can be very difficult to do with very little notice, as we have here. I get it. So we're going to let you go, Eamon Javers, so you can go do that and try to shoehorn your way into that room, because I hope if you're not there or somebody else, that question about a potential pause on tariffs is asked, because it moved markets by about 7 or 8% in a matter of minutes until you debunked that headline yourself on CNBC. So I'm going to shut up and let you go. Eamon Javers, thank you very much. Thanks, Brian. All right, so we're going to get back to Jonathan Krinsky in just a second, but I want to also call your attention to the bond market, because as stocks sell off, government bonds get bought. When the price goes up, the yield comes down, and we're seeing the 10-year yield bouncing around as well. We're at 4.16 right now, but got down to 3.87 earlier today. Diana Olick joining us now. Diana, let's do this, as opposed to tell us what's happening right now, but also give us kind of a lesson in how the mortgage market moves when you have these kinds of rapid and violent changes in rates.
Well, it's really actually hard to tell, Brian, because we only get one read on mortgage rates per day. We get that from Mortgage News Daily. Actually, CNBC gets that every morning because Mortgage News Daily runs those morning numbers. But usually others will get that weekly rate. We get that from the Mortgage Bankers Association and from Freddie Mac, and that's kind of a general look at the whole week. But on this daily one, we've seen a lot of, day-to-day volatility, as of course we have in the stock market. So after falling last week, the average rate on the 30-year fix actually took a big leap higher this morning because, again, of those rising bond yields. It rose 15 basis points to 6.75%. But I would also note that Friday's early rate was revised higher later in the day, again, because of bond yields. So any upside to that huge stock market sell-off for mortgage rates is now erased. In the rates, at least. We're right back to that very tight range that mortgage rates have been in really for the last month and a half. But if you look and go back to the start of this year, rates were over 7%. And then they dropped sharply in February. During February, pending home sales, which are a measure of signed contracts on existing homes, so that's people out making deals when rates were dropping, they only rose 2% from January despite a lot more inventory on the market. And they were still close to 4% lower than last February. Now, the most current data that I like to use for housing demand, though, is the weekly mortgage applications. And while they have been moving higher recently from home buyers, they're wobbling in another tight range that is still well below where we were pre-pandemic. And when mortgage rates were falling in February, mortgage demand from home buyers was also falling. Usually those go in opposite directions. So it all comes down to what I keep hearing from housing experts, which is that mortgage rates are falling, but for all the wrong reasons for home buyers, reasons that don't make consumers want to go out and make a huge purchase like a home. Brian?
And that really, I think, is the trillion-dollar question, because the one potential upside to all this is lower rates, unless the fear about the economy causes people to seize up. All right, hold on, Diana. There is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arriving at the White House and shaking hands with President Trump. I don't think they're close enough to hear any comments, but let's listen in for a second.
Mr. President, have you seen the markets today?
All right, there we go. Into the White House we go. As you heard Eamon say, no formal press conference between those two men later on today, but we will get some questions of the president, apparently in what we in the industry call a pool spray. So, Diana Olick, going back to you, lower rates matter a lot unless, you heard my point, people are so nervous about the economy to kind of seize up, freeze up, whatever term you want to use.
Exactly, because for most people, a home is going to be their single largest investment. And what we've seen in the housing market over the last several months is that really most of the activity is on the higher end of the market. Those are stockholders. Those are people who invest and who are seeing their portfolios drop dramatically. And so if they're thinking, well, I could afford a home, I have the down payment, I wanted to move up into that home, but I'm worried about my retirement funds. I'm worried about where the economy is going, or maybe I'm worried that I'm going to lose my job. I don't think I'm going to buy that house right now. And so also, when you see these rates moving in such volatile situations, again, it's not going to make somebody decide based on that rate. It's been moving in such a narrow range that it's really not going to be that difference for even a first-time buyer who might not be able to make that down payment so easily, because every little move is not going to be able to make them say, okay, now I can buy a home.
Yeah, and if they were hoping to sell stocks to fund the down payment, that's likely way down, and so now they have less money for the down payment. I'm trying to find some silver lining in this. It might come from mortgages, maybe commercial. Diana Olick, we'll save that for another day. Diana Olick, thank you very much. All right, so let's go back now to the very patient Jonathan Krinsky. Jonathan, thank you. On Friday, not today, home builders are down today, but on Friday, they were the only sector of the market that was higher. What's your technical take on the home builders or anything real estate related vis-a-vis interest rates?
Yeah, so sometimes when you're going through a bottoming process, and again, we don't know if this is the bottom, but in a bottoming process, you get the parts of the market that were first into the bear market and the hardest hit are the ones that perform the best initially coming off the bottom. And I think home builders was clearly one of those sectors. Conversely, on the other side of the coin, at the tail end of the correction, you finally get the areas of the market that have held up the best and that is the low volatility, the defensive names. Think of your consumer staples, your utilities. So those actually got hit the hardest on Friday, and we think there's still some risk to those groups in either direction, right? If you get a rebound in the market, a risk rebound, those defensive sectors are going to lag, and those hardest hit groups like the home builders, maybe some tech names or some consumer names likely get the biggest rebound initially off the bottom.
I want to ask you one question about volume and this data. I'm going to sound smart because I've got Gina and Chris and everybody on the data team behind us here at CNBC doing the heavy lifting for me. We're seeing 18.5 billion shares traded already. That's more than the 10-day moving average of 60 for the whole day. By the way, we've already surpassed by 2 billion the average daily volume, and we still have 2.5 hours left to go. And on Friday, we had the highest volume day going back to the financial crisis of 2007. What, if anything, Jonathan, does that type of volume tell you about the market?
You know, it's volume is really just a function of the volatility. I mean, you can't really have a market, sell off or crash or whatever you want to call this without an increase in volume. It almost always happens, at least on the index level. So I think that's telling. It's part of the capitulatory, some of the capitulatory signals you're seeing, along with the inverted VIX curve, starting to see some elevated put-call ratios, just different sentiment measures. So it's consistent with that capitulation. And yeah, today should be a record for a lot of different volume metrics.
Yeah, looks like we're headed there at 18.5 billion shares traded already. Jonathan Krinsky, BTIG, appreciate it.
Thanks,
all right, so amid all of this, Congress trying to advance the president's budget plan at the same time. Of course, the hard part now will be getting it past the House as more members of the GOP come out and softly, at least for now, criticize the tariff policy. Emily Wilkins in D.C. with more on this side of the story. Emily.
Hey, Brian. Well, yeah, this is honestly the story that's going to take up all the oxygen on Capitol Hill this week. This framework for Trump's legislative agenda. Remember, that's the tax package, that's border, that's energy. And it cleared the Senate over the weekend, but now it is facing a high hurdle in the House. About half a dozen Republicans are publicly saying that they will be voting against the bill over concerns that it will add trillions to the deficit. Now, this package, it requires House members to find $1.5 trillion in spending cuts. But the bill, it has completely different instructions for the Senate, requiring the Senate to only find $4 billion. So one bill here, two completely different instructions. That's causing some heartburn. Senate bill also uses what some are calling a budgeting gimmick, making several $trillion not count toward the overall cost of this bill, which also has House Republicans worried. You have the chair of the House Budget Committee, Congressman Jody Arrington. He called the Senate bill unserious and disappointing on social media. And then Congressman Andy Harris, he's the head of the Freedom Caucus, and he tweeted that he can't support House passage of the Senate changes to our budget resolution until I see the actual spending and deficit reduction plans to enact President Trump's America First agenda. Now, congressional leaders say they just want to pass the framework now before Congress leaves town for 2 weeks, and then they will negotiate that final number of cuts later when they figure out the policy details. Speaker Mike Johnson plans to hold a vote on the bill as soon as Wednesday. Brian, of course, we're keeping an eye for all things tariff up on Capitol Hill, but this is also going to be a big push to get through this week if Republicans want to deliver on the other parts of Trump's agenda.
Is there any more growing signs, chatter, speculation, rumor, whatever word you want, Emily, that certain members of the GOP might use this time to use it as the lever against the president's tariff plan, because a lot of GOP members and their constituents, they're also not happy?
At this point, it doesn't seem too likely that Republicans are going to have a lot of movement on tariffs this week. Of course, you have Jamison Greer coming to the Hill. That should make for a couple of interesting hearings and back and forth questions. What I'm going to be very closely watching for, though, is after this week, lawmakers go back home for 2 weeks. Very interested to see when they return to Congress and in D.C. in late April, early May, what is the vibe going to be? What are they going to hear from their constituents? Then how are these tariffs going to and factored into prices, then I would expect to maybe see a little more movement and a little more pushback. Right now, the line that a lot of Republicans are holding is that they want to give Trump time to see what he actually does. The concern, of course, is if these tariffs go on for too long, I would expect to see a lot more Republicans begin to take action.
Yeah, a long way to go, and we'll see what happens. And by the way, the courts still not entirely out of the question. Didn't even have time to get to that. But there's a lot of network show left this week. Emily Wilkins, thank you very much. All right, so folks, it has been that kind of day, and we can bring them back up on the screen. But the so-called Magnificent Seven, as a group, have swung 10% today, from collapse at the open to a violent retracement to going back down to many of them, including the macro CNBC Mag 7 index, higher now, not by hardly anything, 1/100th of 1%, but it is green, not red, and so we shall take that. Our trader watching this and many other things that are happening in the market right now, and that is Jeff Kilberg. Jeff Kilberg of KKM Financial. Jeff, what do you make of the market action today? I know it's kind of a lame question on my part, but I'm not going to lie, I don't know what else to ask.
Sully, it has been chaotic, it has been skittish, and it has been remarkable to see. And as you know, we always talk about the VIX, which tries to measure option premiums in the S&P 500. Well, if we look at the realized move, and remember, the VIX measures the implied move, the expectation of a move, but the realized move today in the S&P 500 from the bottom to the top was over 9%. That's a VIX of 148. And we saw the actual VIX range, which is implied volatility, from 60 down to 38. So this is, I know I'm saying these numbers casually, but this is seismic. This is historic. To see volume with it, I am optimistic that I think we are seeing the skid